Do you have teenage girls in your life? Did you find it easier to sew things for them when they were 5 than now that they are 15 or older? Well, I have got some ideas for you. In this mashup, I have gathered 10 full tutorials of things that I think the teenage girls in my life would love. And hopefully the girls in your life will too. You don't have to watch them all. Just look at the description below the video. It will list out each of the projects and what time they start. So you can jump ahead to whichever one you want to try first. I were doing groups. I would do the makeup brush holder, maybe with some brushes, and the reusable makeup removers and some makeup remover that you get at the store, obviously. So without further ado, let's get into it. They're back. Scrunchies. I remember making these when I was in high school and college back in the late 80s and 90s, and I am so excited they have made a comeback. They are so quick and easy to make, great for summer, just getting your hair out of your face, perfect for a sleepover party bag, bachelorette party, girls trip, or just because. This would also be a great project to sew and sell. So let me show you how quick and easy these are to whip up. First, let's look at what you need. Most scrunchies can be made out of a piece of fabric 18 inches wide by 5 inches high. If you want it to be a little bit fuller, you could do it 20 inches, but I wouldn't go much beyond that, or it's going to be hard to sew the elastic to. Speaking of elastic, I use a 3/8 inch flat braided elastic for making scrunchies. How long do you want that to be? The most common size is 6 inches long. If you're making this for someone with really thick hair, you might go to 8 inches. If you're making it for a child, you might try 5, but I would start with 6 and see how it goes. I have pretty fine hair. This works for me. My daughter-in-law has thick hair and it worked for her too, but she said it stayed better and was a little bit fluffier when she used an elastic band on her hair before putting the scrunchie on. Then you're going to need a pin to get the elastic through this once we get it sewn together. You don't have to have a hot ruler, but it is a pretty cool tool, and if you haven't tried it before, I want to show you how that works. Same with the clapper. Don't have to have it. I just love it. I'll show you how that works. And then you need an iron. I'm just going to use this little baby one because we are only doing one ironing spot along one short edge. So it's super quick and easy. Let's get started. The first thing we need to do is we need to iron one of these short edges over by 1/4 inch. And here is how a hot ruler works. It's very flexible. It's a little bit fuzzy to the touch, and you can iron right on it. So what you do is you line it up and you make sure, just by looking, like I'm going to use the 8-inch line for no particular reason, and make sure it is on that edge, because otherwise you're going to be ironing crooked. But that's a good, easy way to get that quickly lined up. Then you just kind of guess, okay, that's about 1/4 inch. Now let's fold it over, and if the edge hits that 1/4 inch mark, you're like, yay, we are good to go. Then you can just hold that down and press right over it. Then I use my quilter's clapper just to press that a little bit more, get the heat out of it, and it is ready to sew. Now, this does have a teeny bit of thickness to it, so sometimes I will come back over it and press again, just to really get that fold creased nicely. You know, this is kind of a novelty to use for a project like this, but then you're not having to hold it as much with your fingers. It works really well when you're having to fold over a really long edge. So this is one of my favorite kind of novelty sewing and quilting tools that I wanted to share with you. Now I'm just going to sew straight down just to hold that fold down, but to make sure that your thread doesn't get sucked in to your machine and create a big old bird's nest, I'm going to put it under the foot. I'm going to use a leader fabric. This is just a scrap piece of fabric. I'm going to butt up to the back edge of this. I'm going to actually start sewing on the leader fabric, because then if you get any bird's nest, it's going to be back here. It will be cut off of your project and you'll be sewing smoothly by the time you hit your scrunchie. Once you're on your scrunchie fabric, you're going to go forward and back a little bit just to knot that. And I had that stitch length set a bit small for this because I'd use a smaller stitch length when I do the elastic. So you can use like a 2.4, 2.5 for this part. I'm going to switch that. Now I'm going to fold it in half, right sides together, and we are just going to sew down the long edge, leaving both of the short ends open so that we can put the elastic all the way through. And I'm going to use that leader fabric again. Now I'm just going to cut that leader fabric off again. Keep that for the next thing. And now we're going to go back and turn this right side out and string the elastic through. Now I'm just going to turn this right side out. I like to turn it right side out from the sewn edge because this is a raw edge and it'll fray a little bit more. And I've tried different ways. It's wide enough and short enough that I just do it with my fingers and I just push it through, reach in there and pull it out. If you want to use a turning tool or a safety pin, you can, but I don't know that it really saves you all that much time versus doing it this way. If you're making a lot of scrunchies, this would be a great thing to do while you're watching TV. So that leads me to a question. Do you watch TV while you sew? Do you listen to podcasts? Do you listen to audiobooks? I'm curious. And if you have any suggestions for things to watch or listen to, I'm sure I and others would love to. So now that's right side out. I'm going to take a pin. I'm just using a quilting pin, kind of longer. You can use any kind you want. And I'm just going to put that all the way through the tube. You want to make sure you hold on to this end. So your fabric is going to get really bunched up. Because remember, our fabric is 18 inches long. This is 6 inches long. So it's nice and bunchy. So now we have it like that. Now we are going to overlap it a little bit. I probably overlap that just under a 1/2 inch. And I'm going to sew that together. I usually sew down one angle and across and try and keep it lined up as well as possible. It is a little bit tricky. I'm going to clip it together just so it doesn't pop apart and go inside my fabric as we head back to the sewing machine. So this is not only a little tricky to sew, but also a little tricky to film so that you can see what I'm doing and not just see the scrunchie. So I'm going to do my very best. I always have the fabric in front of me because I do have a walking foot on there and I really don't want this pulled around by either the feed dogs or the walking foot. And I'm going to be using my leader fabric again, make sure it's covering the feed dogs and is under here just so we have something to move. Now I have to take the clip off or I won't be able to get it under, and you'll see it's only overlapping a teeny bit and we want to keep it as straight as possible. If it doesn't stay perfectly straight, it's fine. It's going to be on the inside. But the goal is to keep it lined up. So sometimes I'll just take my scissors, whoops, and hold it in place as I get it under here. I'm using the leader fabric because trying to lift the bobbin thread and hold this little piece of elastic together and all of that at the same time, it's just a lot. So I just do this. And that did not stay very straight. So while the needle is down, I'm just going to lift my foot and I'm going to line that back up. And I actually overlapped that a little bit less than intended, but I went back and forth a few times, so it should be good, and it will get secured one more time when we sew the two pieces of fabric together. So now you have two options. You have one of the raw edges, and then the other end is finished. So if you want it to look perfectly store-bought, you can just put one inside the other, the raw edges inside the finished one, and you could hand stitch around the edge so that it looks perfect. That to me is not quite worth it. I'm going to sew straight across with my sewing machine because once you get this on your head, you're not really going to notice that this is going to be a bit flatter because it is sewn in a seam. So what I'm doing is I'm lining this up and I'm lining up the seam on both sides of this. I'm going to make sure that this is flat, and then I'm just going to sew straight across. That will also give me one more stitch line through the elastic. That is how easy it is. You can sew this up in probably 10 minutes or less, and if you wanted to make a bunch, you just do each section at the same time. On this white one, I did one that was 18 inches and one that was 20 inches long. I honestly can't tell which was which. I think this one has a little more rippling, so this probably has 20 inches, so it's going to look a little bit fuller when used, but not a huge difference. So whether you're making them 18 inches long or 20 inches long, you can get 2 scrunchies out of every 5-inch strip if you're going selvage to selvage or with the fabric. So it is a very cost-effective project and cute and fun. Let me know in the comments who you're going to make these for. Are you going to sell them? Are you going to give them as gifts? Are you going to use them as party favors, trip things? I would love to know. If you're a fan of 2.5-inch pre-cut strips that you buy in little packs like this, I'm going to show you how to turn your extra scraps into nail file holders. And I'm going to show you how you can make them for any size nail file. Have you ever stuck your hand in your purse and inadvertently messed up your nail or scratched the top of your polish with one of the nail files in there? Ugh, it is the worst. This is where cute little fabric nail file holders come into play. Now, most nail files come in these two sizes. You can get those real little skinny ones too, the 7 inches and then the 3.5 inch long. And you can buy these in bulk. You'll be shocked at how inexpensive they are on Amazon. You can get like 100 to 200 of these for $5 to $10. And these for 100, you can get between, I think, $5 and $12. It just depends. If you want to just go with a basic color, it's going to be less expensive than something fun. This is an incredibly budget-friendly project. Let's start with this one. I am going to cut it to 14.5 inches long. Now, the way you figure out the length that you need is you measure the length of your nail file, you multiply it by 4, and you add 1/2 inch. Now we're just going to fold it, matching the short ends. We're going to take it to the sewing machine and just sew straight down both sides. Now we're going to sew each side with a 1/4 inch seam. Now if you're going to be making more than one at a time, just daisy chain, go down one side of all of them and then the other side, and you can just clip them off and keep going in one long strip. From one 40-inch strip of 2.5 inch wide fabric, you can make one long and one short nail file holder. Now I'm just going to clip these corners a teeny bit on the folded end so that it's going to make a better point when we turn that right side out. And I like to do really long angled to get a lot of that fabric out of there. If you have tube turners, this is the perfect project for it. I use the 1/2 inch. If you don't, you're just going to use your fingers, turn these right side out. But let me show you how this tube turner works. You put the hollow part into your project. It's even more important on longer ones. And then you take your stick with the pointier end going in first, and you push the fabric into the tube and pull it. See how fast that is? Now, when you use the pointy part, you can then use that as your turner and push those corners out. You want to do that really slowly and gently so that you don't all of a sudden see that point come through your fabric and get really bummed. So that's set. If I didn't have the tube turner, I could turn this right side out, like you turn anything right side out, push that in, pull it out as best you can. It's a little harder on your fingers. It takes a lot longer without this tool. And it's very inexpensive. They're usually under $10 for a set of 3. And I use them for so many different projects. I would highly recommend you go grab one. I will have a link to find it on Amazon, or you can find it in most sewing stores, Michael's, places like that. So imagine how much of a pain that would be to do by hand. But with the tube turner, it is lickety split. And this is the size for one of the longer nail files. So I pulled it down. You don't want to pull this off until you have the fabric through, because you want to hold that fabric, pull that down, pull that off. But see how fast that was? These are amazing if you're making aprons and have those really long straps. You can turn them right side out in a jiffy. So now let's take all 3 of these. We're just going to make 3 at once today. We're going to take all 3 of these to the ironing board. So what we need to do is we need to get these seams pulled out evenly. We don't want it to be folded over. Like, we don't want any of the fabric tucked in as we press. So I usually just take my fingers and I move them back and forth and get one side good and iron that side, and then press down with the tailor's clapper. And then I come and do the other side. I find trying to do both at the same time, I often end up with one side not quite right, where it's, not pulled out as much, and then it's not going to be straight. And then I'm using this to help cool off the fabric and really set that so it is nice and flat. So I'm going to get all 3 of these to that same stage, and then we are going to press those raw edges in, and we are going to sew across the top to basically make a closed fabric tube. Turn that under about a 1/4 inch. If you go a little bit further, it's totally fine. This is not a quilt block, so it's not something that needs to be super precise. Just make sure it is folded and even. And then press that. I've seen other tutorials where people use interfacing or even a stiff interfacing to make the nail holders harder, but I really don't think it's necessary because the nail file is going to do that for you. And I am all about quick and easy projects with as few materials as possible. So let's not make this more complicated than it needs to be and just use a piece of fabric. And as you can see, if you just do each step multiple times, you can really whip out a bunch of these at once. So that does make it a great gift, a great project. or idea to sew and sell because you can use your fabric scraps. It's not going to take you a lot of time. The nail files aren't expensive, and it is a great impulse purchase if you sell at craft fairs or online. These are all pressed and ready, so we're going to go back to the machine and we're going to sew straight across the open edges of all three. If you want your thread to coordinate so it's not very visible, you could pick something that matches. But because I'm doing a few, I'm just going to use white thread so that I can get all three of these done quickly. And I did one where it matched the green, so I'll be able to show you the difference that the thread can make. I'm going to use a little leader fabric, which is just a little scrap piece of fabric that I'm going to put behind what I am sewing, because then I can start back here. I don't have to worry about pulling up the bobbin thread, and I can just sew right onto here, back stitch, and get that sewed closed. So you're not going to have any kind of a bird's nest on the project, and you don't have to take that time to pull up the bobbin thread. I like to do that when I'm starting off of the edge of a project. Just makes it easier and faster. So we have all three of those. Now we're just going to take that leader fabric off the back so that we can use it again. Snip these apart, cutting off the excess thread in between if there is any. And we're going to go back to the workspace. I'm going to show you how to decide how much to fold these up before we finish the sewing. Isn't this easy? Who are you going to make them for first? I would love to know. Now we are going to fold these up and sew them together. So this one, the nail file is almost all the way in. You can also make them longer and have them flap over, but this is the quickest and easiest way. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your strips of fabric and you're going to put the folded side up. Then you're going to place your nail file on there, and you're going to fold it up. If you want it to be exactly like that, you can just sew here and here as two separate stitch lines. But because I like things to move a little bit faster, I like to sew down, across, and up and be done. Which means this is going to stick out a little bit more because you're going to lose here. So see, that's where the edge of that nail file is. So now it's coming across the top. So I'm gonna just move this down a little bit more, fold that up, because I want my file to not go above the backing. So that is how long I want that one. I'm just going to put a little clip in there. I'm gonna do the same thing on this one. And oh my gosh, isn't this tape measure perfect with the little quilt block fabric? Love it. So I'm pushing to make sure there's about a 1/2 inch up there, because then when I push that up a little to accommodate for the stitching that's going to go across there, we know how much it's going to come out. And if you don't want as much sticking out, just use a longer strip of fabric. Back to the sewing machine, we are almost done. Now on the last step, I taught you a trick to not have to pull the bobbin thread up, but here you're going to need to, because we're starting in the center of fabric. There's fabric in front and behind where you're starting, and you're going to see the back. What you do is you hold the top thread, put your foot down, put your needle down, lift your needle, give a little tug, and then I always keep tweezers so that I can grab that without poking my finger. It also helps me push those threads down, get it under the foot. Now I'm going to hold both of these threads as I take my first few stitches forward and back to knot. And that will prevent the machine from pulling that thread under and creating what we love to call bird's nests. They are so quick and easy to sew. Throw them in your purse. These make great gifts. Teacher appreciation, they could be shower favors, you could put them into a little self-care box, a manicure gift, so many things that you can do with these. So that one is done. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the other two. All that's left is to add the nail files. How cute is that? Let me know in the comments if you're going to give this as a solo gift, if you're going to make a little manicure, pedicure gift pack with it, what you plan to do. I'm always curious about what people do with my projects. Make sure you have subscribed to my channel, hit that bell so YouTube lets you know every time I post something new, and let's have some fun sewing together. If your lip balm knows how to hide in your purse, as well as a dog that doesn't want to go to the vet, then you need to watch this tutorial and learn how easy it is to make a cute lip balm holder. These are so convenient, and when you use the key fob hardware, you can attach your key to it too. You can hook it in your purse, hook it onto your water bottle, anything with a hook. But before we get started, my name is Tara Reed. I am an artist and fabric designer with Riley Blake Designs.
Be sure to click subscribe if you haven't already, and make sure you click that little bell so YouTube knows that you want to know when I post new videos, which is about weekly. So let's dive into this and get our lip balm under control. Let's dive into how easy it is to make a lip balm holder with fabric interfacing and a 1-inch key fob. What you're going to need to start is a 15-inch by 2¼ inch strip of fabric and also the same size fusible interfacing. And I am using the 911 fusible featherweight interfacing from Pellon. Then a pen or a heat resistant pen. You can use a regular one if you need to. Your key fob hardware. I highly recommend getting the pliers. It makes it much easier, but if you need to, you can use a hammer to close that if you don't want to invest in this. But key fob holders are one of my favorite things, so I recommend you invest in it. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to put the interfacing on the wrong side of our fabric. And the interfacing, you know which side is which, because one side you can see, I don't know if you can see the little bumps. That is the part that fuses or melts to your fabric. So that part needs to be down, and then it's smooth on the other side. If you do it backwards, you're going to put a bunch of glue gunk on your iron. Not the best. So you're going to put it down like this and line those up. And then, because every once in a while you make a mistake and you do it backwards, right? Tell me I'm not the only one. You can also use a pressing cloth, which you can buy these that are specifically pressing cloths. It's just a thin piece of cotton. I like it because you can see through it often. And you can put that over top. So if for some reason some of the fusible material gets between the fabric and your iron, it's going to go onto this pressing cloth and not onto your iron. So I'm going to get that done and then show you what to do next. Now I have the interfacing ironed onto the backside of the fabric, and that's just going to give us a little bit more stability with our fabric and our little holder when we're done. Now we're going to fold it in half and match these ends. Fold that down and either put a pin in it to make sure this part doesn't slide while we do the next part, or I sometimes just do a clip at the bottom, just depending on what I have. We're going to line this up. So see, each of these thicker lines, that's 1 inch. So we want to center this fabric on a 1-inch increment. And because we did 2¼ it's going to be just shy of each of these little dotted lines. Okay, so there's our 1 inch. Now I'm going to make a mark 1/4 inch to each side of that 1 inch because we're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam. What we're trying to do right now is to figure out the angle to cut this so that the tip is the same width as your 1-inch key fob hardware. We could leave it out and it could just go like that, but I just think it looks more finished this way and it doesn't take a lot more work. So we make a mark and then about 3/4 inch down on each side. Then you're just going to draw a little line, make sure it stays together, and you're just going to cut. Now we're going to take it to the sewing machine and we're going to sew down each of the angle and each of the long sides. Leave this end open for turning using a 1/4 inch seam. Now we're going to turn this right side out and we're going to use this cute little flamingo turning tool to make sure the angle there and the points are out. All right, now I got it most of the way out. Now I'm just going to gently run this along that seam at the top. So we get that 1 inch part out. And I just kind of roll the seams to make sure it's all out nicely. Flatten it as much as I can with my fingers. Then we're just going to iron that flat. Now I'm just going to take it back to the sewing machine and either do a quick zigzag, or you can just do a straight stitch right close to that. It's going to be inside. So this part right here is going to be deep in here. So if you want to just do a straight stitch, you can. And that's what I'm going to do, and I'll be right back. So I just did a straight stitch there because it's going to stop that from fraying. It's going to be inside, and I did not feel like changing my presser foot. Now, this part is really important if you have directional fabric, which I do. You can tell more from a bigger piece. See, most of the fruit looks good this way, and it looks upside down this way. So you want to make sure it doesn't look upside down when you're done your holder. You want these grapes going the direction that it hangs, if that's what ends up on here. So you're going to do it like this, and look, these are backwards. So we're going to turn it over this way. So this is going to be the front. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to fold this up an inch. Just use this handy dandy little ruler. Fold that up an inch. Press that. So we're sewing a 1/4 inch from this folded edge, but I'm going to turn it over because the underside when you do the knot and everything sometimes looks a little bit worse. So we're going to make sure this looks really good from the top because this will be the side that we see. And then we're going to turn it back so that the raw edge is up, and this is going to be the front because the fruit is right side up. Now we're going to turn it up about 2.5 inches. But before I sew that, I always check, grab your favorite lip balm, shout out to Burt's Bees. So I always check to make sure that when it goes in, it's going to stick out a little bit so that it's easy to grab in and out of this holder. I'm just going to clip both sides. Now, one thing to be careful of is sometimes this raw edge like sticks out on the corner. So just make sure you tuck that in as you sew around. I am using a Janome sewing machine with a 1/4 inch walking foot, and I find it works a lot better than the traditional foot, even if it's a walking foot, because this 1/4 inch has like one walker that's right in the center, whereas the other one has it on both sides and it only grabs one side of the fabric when you're sewing really close. So if you have that option, make sure you use it. Now we're just going to sew all around here about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. And you're going to double back where this meets, just so it's more secure, because that's going to be the area that gets the most use, putting your lip balm in and out. I don't know if you can see this. I'm seeing a little bit of that edge, so I'm just going to tuck that under with my scissors before I sew over that. All that's left is to go add the key fob. The last step is to attach our hardware, which is basically a piece of metal, and it's got these little, triangles that are going to dig into and attach to the fabric to keep that nice and secure. And it comes with a key ring. And there's a link below the video to find them on Amazon if you are on my YouTube channel or my website. So it's going to line up like that. So you can either do it like that and put it in to the pliers. I highly recommend the pliers. If you don't have any, what you're going to do is you're going to line this up, put a little piece of fabric over there and gently hammer it. Put fabric on there so that you don't dent or scratch the metal, so that it'll still look good. But I love key fobs, definitely worth the pliers. And this is what I've learned over the years of doing key fobs. The easiest way to do it is to set your hardware in your key fob first. And this gently close it so it'll hold, right? So it holds there. Then take whatever you're putting into it and put it in and double check on both sides to make sure it's lined up with the top so it looks nice and professional. And then you simply squeeze. And that's it. It is done. It is ready for your lip balm.
If you're looking for ways to use your fabric scraps, why not consider replacing your disposable makeup removers with cute and functional reusable makeup removers? These are made from fabric scraps and baby washcloths. If it's soft enough for a baby, it is soft enough for my face. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make these. And at the end, I will also show you how to make a cute and simple drawstring bag if you want to use them to give these as a gift or to sew and sell. Let's get into it. All right, I'm in the baby aisle and we're going to do some math because I think these would be really soft and nice for reusable makeup removal pads. So let's see which is going to be a better deal. You can buy 6 washcloths. They are $8.48 and they are 9 by 9. So you get about 54 by 54 less whatever this edging is, which we would need to cut off. Okay, so that's one option. The next option is to just buy a big towel. I feel really bad to cut that little face off, but let's see where the money goes. So this is 26 by 30 and it's $9.48. So this is definitely less material for the price. Winner chicken dinner, baby washcloths, because if they're good enough for baby, they're going to be nice and soft on your face. So today's goal is to replace these cotton rounds with something reusable that I can just throw in the laundry. This will be great for myself, also a great gift for teens or anyone who uses makeup and you just want to grab some fabric scraps and do something different. So first I want to look at how big this is. And this is just under 2.5 inches round. I've seen a lot of these made and being sold on Etsy and other places with a serger. And then they do the circles because it's really easy to just serge around it. I don't have a serger, so I am going to make squares. Let's take a look at these baby washcloths that we grabbed at Walmart. I'm going to save that ribbon for something else. That's a good piece of ribbon. And these are craft scissors, not fabric scissors, so I can cut all these plastic things with it without anybody needing to freak out, including myself. So we'll just take a look at one. So these are 9 by 9, but we need to cut off the edge. And I think we need to iron it first because we want this to be nice and smooth when we are cutting, and we also want our scrap fabric to be nice and smooth. I have these all ironed nice and flat, and I ironed my scrap fabrics that I'm going to use. Now, to be most efficient with this, because these are 9 by 9, but we need to cut this off, I'm going to cut these into 8-inch squares. And I thought using the rotating cutting mat would make that easy. I'm just cutting a little bit off. Let's see. So we have 2 sides that are squared. And it's going to be right here. So it looks like it might have a teeny bit of that curved bias binding, but that's going to end up in the seam allowance. So I think this is going to work. All right, so we have 8 by 8, and now we are going to cut it into 4 4-inch squares. Okay, so from one we get 4 squares, but they happen to be doubled, but it's very thin. So I'm going to keep them together. So I'm going to use the 2 layers for each of mine. So from one set of 6 towels, we are going to be able to make 24 of these reusable face cleaners if we cut them to 4 by 4. And they were $8.48 when I bought them, divided by 24. That's going to be 35 cents each for your material. And then I'm using fabric scraps, so I'm calling that a sunk cost. You need to know these things if you're going to sew and sell, or if you're on a budget for gift making and you want to try and keep things in a certain range. So always do your calculations and figure out your cost per unit. And because this fabric is so stretchy, it really makes using this rotary mat that much easier, because having to shift and line it up each time becomes a little bit more difficult when you're using something stretchy like this. And I'm just kind of stacking them so they're tilted, just so the 2 pieces stay together. And once I get all of those cut, I'm going to just cut my scraps into 4 by 4 pieces as well. And I'm using scraps from my Honeybees and Sunflowers Please fabric that came out from Riley Blake Designs in March of 2023. Often for older fabrics, you might be able to find it on Etsy, easier than in shops, but do check your local shops if they carry Riley Blake fabric as well. You could make these all the same fabric. You could do a variety like I am. It just really depends if you're starting from bigger pieces of fabric or if you're trying to use up some of your scraps from your scrap bin. Let me know in the comments what you think. Who are you going to make this for? Are you going to use one fabric? Are you going to use a few? I'd love to know. Now that we have a lot of these cut, we're going to put the washcloth microfiber material on the right side of our fabric. And then I'm going to use clips. And we're going to sew all the way around with a 1/4 inch seam and leave maybe 2 inches open on one side for turning. I'm going to put them on a design board as I get them clipped together. Usually I use this for quilting to organize quilt blocks, but it is going to be a good way to move these from my workspace over to my sewing machine. And if you want to learn how to make these, it's just foam core, extra batting, and fabric on the edge. I will put a link to the video tutorial. Okay, I have 8 ready, so let's just go sew those together and see how this turns out. So now I'm just going to sew around, leave about 2 inches open to turn with a 1/4 inch seam. And I am using a walking foot, or on the Janome it's called an AccuFeed foot, that helps move the top fabric as well as the bottom is being moved by the feed dogs on the machine. This is pretty stretchy. I'm just using a regular stitch and trying to hold it all in place. If it stretches a teeny bit, we're going to be clipping those corners anyway, so it should be fine. As you can see, when they were cut, it was a good square, but it did push a little bit and stretch on some of these corners as I moved, but it's a face cleaner, so it's going to be fine. Now I'm just going to turn that over and I'm going to clip those corners. Make sure you don't clip the stitching. You're just trying to get some of that bulk out that needs to turn into that corner. Because again, it is a face cleaner, I'm not super concerned about these corners being super sharp. Here's one that I did. I'm fine with them being kind of curved. It actually gives it kind of a nice shape for this. But if you want it to be sharper, I will put a link to a video that shows you how to add little pieces of thread to make these corners sharper. It's just, to me, not something that's worth it for this kind of a project. Now I'm just going to turn this right side out and then we're going to press it. You will also notice there's a bit of fuzz, so you are going to need to be aware and probably clean. If you have a top loading like me, you're going to need to clean your sewing machine definitely when you're done with this. And if you're making a lot of them, you might want to double check it after you've done, I don't know, 10 or 12, just to make sure you don't have a ton of fuzz in there that is going to mess up your machine. All right, so now we're going to press it and we're going to press that opening under. Now I have them all sewn together and pressed. Look how cute. And now I just need to top stitch around the edges. I want to keep the white on the top. So I put a navy blue bobbin thread and then I'll use white for the top thread. And because I don't want a knot on the other side, I'm going to raise my bobbin thread. So foot down, needle up, give a tug. I feel like I've shown this so many times, but I know it'll be new to somebody. Okay, grab it with my tweezers, put it under the foot, and I'm going to hold both the top and the bobbin thread right here while I take about 2 stitches forward and back. And that just keeps that from getting pulled down into the machine and creating a knot. So look how cute. Edge stitched, it's soft. We're going to have to give it a try. So I'm just going to do that for all of the squares. So now I have all 8 done. Super cute. And you can either just give, keep, store, sell them like this, or you can create a little bag. I've seen people make little mesh bags so they can put them through the laundry, but a lot of times the mesh bag they put them in isn't going to separate these enough for them to actually get clean. You need one that's kind of big so these can move around. Or I've seen people make a little basket. I'm going to do just a simple drawstring bag that would be great for gifting or selling these. So what I've done is I've taken more extra of this fabric that matches some, and it is 7.5 inches wide by 19.5 inches high. Or you could do 2 7.5 inches by 10 inches, and that's going to be nice and roomy for these and include a drawstring. So I pretty much have about 2 inches on each side because we need to have that, and then you need about 2 inches to come down to make that drawstring channel. So I could make it a little shorter. Let's see. Now I'm going to keep it like this. We'll see what happens. So I'm going to fold it in half, right sides together. Now I'm just going to line it up on my grid, and I'm going to make a mark 2 inches down on each side. And that's going to become the channel for the drawstring. Now I'm just going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam from those lines that we marked down to the bottom on each side. Now you could do a French seam. We're not doing that with this one. We're just having a raw edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a wavy rotary cutter, or you could use pinking shears, and I'm going to cut along the stitch line, just up to this line. Don't go all the way up, making sure that I don't cut the stitches. And that is going to help it not fray. Next, I'm going to clip on that line just to where the stitch line would be. That's going to help us fold that channel in nice and easily. I'm going to bring my ironing board over. I'm going to grab my hot ruler, which is, if you haven't seen it, is kind of flexible, almost feels fuzzy, like, I don't know, felted, but it has all the measurements. I can put it on here We want to fold and press this 1/4 inch. So it makes it really easy. I just fold it down, make sure it's on that line, and I can iron right on top of this ruler. Gets a really quick straight edge. And I'm going to flip it over and do the same. Now, when you're doing the second one, you want to make sure it's going to be even with the first one. So if you have to fold it down a teeny bit more, you can. You just want them to line up. So that's part one. Part one should have been fold the sides in and press. So my clapper not only helps make the creases nice and crisp, but it also pulls the heat out of the fabric. And so then it's not going into my fingers. Instead, it is going into the wood. So I apologize. This should have been the first step. But as you can see, you can make it a second step if you get ahead of yourself like I did. I'm going to refold the top folds that we did. Press those. Now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew all 4 of these just to hold this in place so that it doesn't come out and fray. And then what we'll do is we will fold this down and make our channel for our drawstring. But first we're going to sew these 4 sections. So I'm going to use a leader fabric. I'll just make things go faster, which is basically a scrap of fabric that I can start on and any knots will go there so I don't have to pull up my bobbin thread for all 4 of these small spots. And then when I get onto my project, I'll take a couple of stitches back. Now when I'm doing this, you want to make sure the other side is folded down. You don't want to be sewing these together. You want to be sewing each side individually. And then you just trim that leader fabric off and do the other one. Do this one from the front so I can use the leader fabric easily again. And then I'm going to fold down the side that we just did and we're going to do the other side. Now we have those edges sewn. That helps keep this folded down and the sides folded in. And now we're just going to fold it down so that this fold is just below where we stopped sewing. I'm going to fold the other one. I'm going to press them at the same time just to make sure they're even. I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew all the way around and I'll just fold the seam allowance so that it tucks under one of these sides. Now, because of the style sewing machine I have, I can't fit bags and things to go around because nothing comes off. This table will come off, but it stays this wide. So I always have to sew bags and things like that from the inside where my top is going to the inside. If you can put this around the throat of your machine, you're going to leave yours like this and sew. But I have to turn it right side out and do it the opposite way. So it totally depends on your sewing machine. So I'm going to just lay this seam allowance down flat. I'm going to start back here. And I am going to pull up my bobbin thread, especially since my bobbin thread is on the outside of the bag. And I don't want a knot on the outside of the bag. And now I'm just going to sew all the way around. And this is making the channel for our drawstring. And then when I get here, I need to lay that seam allowance flat again. So let's see how this turned out. I think it could have been a bit shorter. Let's try it. Put these in here, very roomy for sure. They're coming to here. So we could have done about 2 inches shorter, but this will be a nice, cute little bag. Makes the gift look bigger if you're doing it as a gift. Easy to put them in and out. And could just be a bag to be used for something else later. I'm going to try using white rickrack for my ties because I think that would be fun. So to do your ties, because we have this open on both sides, I'm going to put 2 sets so we can just pull like this. Each string or ribbon or whatever you have needs to be twice the width of your bag plus a few inches. Just be a little bit generous because you can always trim that, but you don't want it to be difficult when you're getting it together. So I just measured the one and then I will just make this one the same size. And then you could use a safety pin, but I am going to try this threader set. It comes with 5 of them and see how I like it. I think it's supposed to be faster. So we put whatever you're threading through there, double it over a bit, and then I'm just going to feed the stick through. Much easier on your hands than using a safety pin. I like it. And then you're going to bring it back through so that it comes out the other side. And using this is also why you want it to be generous. Oh my gosh, that was so easy. I love these. I'll put a link. Now for the second one, you want your ends to come out of this side. So we're going to start and stop on the side where we just looped with the first one. This is one of those inexpensive tools that if you do a lot of drawstrings or bags like that, definitely going to be worth the investment. And because it comes with multiples, it could be easy to use with a group if you're teaching 4-H kids or scouts to sew. So now you want to make sure these strings stay at least so that they are flat. So I made these way too long. Then I'm just going to knot them and then just trim about 1/4 inch from the knot. Then I'll knot this side. I usually try and make it about the same length. Clip that. And then you just put your reusable makeup removers and then you just pull and it's in a cute little bag. Okay, let's see how it works. I haven't used one before, so you're in it with me. Glasses off. Grab my makeup remover. Okay, put some of that on there. It's nice and soft, I will say that. All right, so there's all my makeup from this eye. Now let's see if it rinses out pretty well. I know I would put it through the laundry too, but just to see if we can get some of it out right away with soap. Yeah, that gets a lot cleaner than I expected. And that's just with hand soap really quickly in the sink. So I think I'm a convert. This is a lot bigger than using this. It's also a lot softer. And it's just going to be way more economical. So I think I'm going to add this to my list of things that I'm going to make for people in my family that want to be more eco-friendly or that I just want to make something cute because you just don't know what to get them. So let me know in the comments if you're going to try this too. So when I went to a YouTube shopping event in October, they gave us lots of really cool goodies to try and see what we like. And one of them was this precision makeup brush kit from BK Beauty. Super cool. Well, I knew that my daughter-in-law wanted to up her makeup game and wanted some new brushes. But because I sew, I don't want to just give it to her in this box. I want to make a roll-up for her because she travels a lot. So I want to make somewhere for her to store these brushes and other brushes or pieces of, makeup supplies that are long and skinny. So that is what I'm going to show you in this video today. If you are interested in doing the same and you want to take a look at these brushes, you can find them in the product links. To learn more about these brushes, thank you very much, BK Beauty. Now let's go make a really cool case for this. Let's take a look at the supplies. You're going to need an outside fabric, an inside fabric, a piece of fusible fleece, 2 pieces of fabric to make the ties, or 2 pieces of ribbon, rotary cutter, cutting mat, ruler, matching thread, pins or clips, and either a turning tool, or I'm going to show you a trick about how to get really good corners turned without a turning tool and with a piece of thread. So stay tuned for that. The other thing I'm going to show you is 3 different ways to make these ties. One is just with ironing, iron press, iron press, iron press. Another one is using a number 25 bias tape maker. And the third way, which I love, is how to use this fabric tube maker. This is from Clover. It's originally designed for jelly roll rugs, so it is fat enough that you can have fabric and batting go through there, but we're just going to use it for the fabric. So really excited to share that with you as well. Let's get a little bit more specific. For the ties, because I'm going to make them, I have 2 strips that are 2¼ inch wide by 19 inches long. Now, if you wanted to use some leftover 2½ inch pre-cuts, you can totally do that. It is just going to make like an 1/8 of an inch difference on how wide your ties are. So no worries at all with that. And then I'm going to be showing you how to do a holder with non-directional fabric. So I'm using a solid on the outside, a print on the inside. There's no up or down. So both of these are 16 inches wide by 18 inches high. Then I'm going to be using fusible fleece. This is cut to 15 3/4 by 13.5. Now you can take notes and write this all down, or I also do have a detailed PDF that you can purchase from my Etsy shop. There will be a link on the video and below the video in the description if you want to have that. It will also show you how to make this with directional fabric. The first step is going to be to adhere the fusible fleece to either the outer fabric or the lining. I usually do it to the lining just in case there's ever any little bubbling. So we're going to head to the ironing board and get that done. So now I have my fusible fleece on my ironing station, and I use usually the Pella 987F. Make sure you read the directions. I want an extra strong bond. So what they tell me to do is put my fleece down first and my fabric on top. But I'll flip it before I iron, but I want to make sure I have it in the right position. So I'm taking my lining wrong side up, and then I'm going to put the fusible fleece down. Now, if you put it in the wrong direction, you've got like an inch and a half on each side. That means it's incorrect. You want it to only have about 1/8 of an inch on each side and the top. This bottom part I left without fleece because the first one I made, I felt it was a little bit too bulky having the fleece in the front of the pockets. I thought having it in the back was going to be plenty, so this is how I decided to write this pattern. So now that I have it positioned with the scratchy fusible part on the wrong side of the fabric, I'm going to just very carefully turn it over so that we have the fleece with the fabric on top. Then I'm going to cover it with a pressing cloth. If you've never used one of these before, it's basically a very thin piece of cotton. You can buy it. It's called a pressing cloth, or you can just use a piece of your own thin cotton. So it also says to wet your pressing cloth. I love these little mister bottles. You can get like 2 for about $9 on Amazon. I'll throw a link in the description if you want one of those. I also use them for starch. So now all I'm going to do is I'm going to be very patient and press across the entire area where my fleece is. It says to press firmly, about 10 to 15 seconds on each section, making sure you're overlapping. Having this fabric wet also makes it easy to see where you've been because it will dry. And you can kind of pull that up and see if it's connected. The edges are usually your biggest problem. So if your edges are good, you're probably good to go. So now I have my fleece nicely fused onto the back of my lining. So I'm going to set that aside. Now let's look at the 3 ways I promised to show you how to make these ties. First one is just going to be with an iron. So what you're going to do is you're going to put it wrong side up. I'm going to fold down about 1/4 inch on one end and press. I'm also going to be using my clapper for this. It is basically an unfinished piece of hardwood. If you wanted to make your own, you could, but you want hardwood. Nothing that's going to warp when moisture and heat gets in there. And it just helps absorb the heat and really press those seams well. So now we're going to fold these long edges together, wrong sides together, and press. So we're basically folding it in half and pressing the whole length. Then I just run my clapper across that. It'll cool it off. It'll make that a better crease. Next, we're going to open it up. Now we're going to press each of these edges right into that crease that we just made, making sure you don't press out that crease. So you just want to press at an angle from each side. And we're going to go all the way down. So basically, you're making the raw edges meet in the middle. And we can do this just like I'm showing you, just with an iron and pressing the entire length 3 times. Or you can use a bias tape maker, and I'm going to show you how to do that in the next step. But we're going to finish this completely ironed version first. Then the final step is to just refold it on that first fold and press. So this is basically making it 1/4 as wide as the original fabric and getting these raw edges in the center. So we have the one end where we turned it under, so there's no raw edges. This one still has raw edges, but that's fine because it's going to be on the inside of the makeup case. And then I usually just put a couple little clips to keep it folded until I'm ready to take it to the sewing machine. Okay, so that's method 1. All you need is your ironing board. Now, method 2, we're going to use the number 25, which usually is blue, bias tape maker. And this gets us through those first 3 steps in one fell swoop. So what you do is you feed it into the end, making sure it is even. So you want these raw edges going up the side evenly. This strip of fabric is a little big for this, but you can make it work. And I'm going to be using this little awl to help push it through. See, it's flat and it's going up both sides evenly. So now we're good. Now, when it comes out on this side, you want these two raw edges to be meeting in the middle. So because we're using a fabric that's a little bit big for this, you don't want to iron right up to the edge. You want to keep it about an inch or two out. So once you know you have this all lined up and these are in the center, you can put your iron down, and then you're just going to pull that back and then just make sure everything is staying lined up as you go. It's a lot faster than ironing the whole thing 3 times. Then you want to open up one end, fold it down 1/4 inch, and then you can usually just fold that back right away. Okay, that looks good. Then I will press that. The bias tape maker gets us to this point. We fold that end under, and then we are going to fold it in half, and we'll be good to go. So I do have a longer video that shows you the 5 main sizes, what size fabric they use, and a little bit more about how to use them. So you'll be able to find the link either above the video or in the video description. So that is tie way number 2. So they look exactly the same. We just got to there in a different way. The next way with the Clover fabric tube maker, we don't even iron until the very end. We're going to get it all folded as we're putting it through the sewing machine and sewing this part closed. So let me show you that magic. Now I want to introduce you to this magical little tool called a fabric tube maker from Clover. So if you've ever seen rugs like this where it's tubes of fabric and they go around and around and they're sewn together, this is a tool that people will use for that. But I found a couple other good uses for it, including making the ties for this makeup bag. So it comes with 4 pieces, 2 that click together for the big part, 2 that click together for the small part. Now it's really important to remember that this is above. I somehow got mine jammed in, but you can see it kind of goes together like a puzzle piece. I will say, I find these a little bit hard to put on and off. So if you have arthritis, this might be a little tricky. This one isn't as bad. Just kind of push your fingers and push forward, and that will come apart. This is the one that really gets me. So what I decided to do was take some flathead pliers and just super, super gently squeeze the side with the pliers to get that squeezed in so that I can push it out. So next, just like with the bias tape maker, you're going to put your fabric wrong side up into that channel. You're going to make sure it's even on both sides. Then you're going to take this, you're going to slip it in until it clicks and keep it up. You can see there's quite a bit of space because it's designed so that you can have batting in there too. So this basically works just like a bias tape maker. It's designed for 2.5 inch, not 2 1/4. So there is a little bit of space there as we push that through. And I'm showing you this on the desktop, and then I'll show you how it works on the sewing machine. But I just want you to know how to load it before we're in tighter spaces at my sewing machine. So now you want to keep it like this. Make sure it's folded, and then you're going to push it through this smaller one. And what this is going to do is it's going to help fold it in half. And then you do the same thing. You keep this kind of on top, push until that clicks. So it's a 2-part system. Your sewing machine is going to be here. I'm going to show you how it works. This is going to do this. This is going to do this. You're going to twist it, and you're going to sew along this edge, sewing these together. So it's not pressed. The idea behind it is you just go right to the sewing machine. So we are going to do that. I just wanted to show you how it was set up before I got started. Now I'm zoomed way back because I want to show you how I have my sewing machine set up. So my sewing machine basically stops here, and then I have this table that extends the space in front of my presser foot and my sewing. And the reason I'm showing you that is it's really, really helpful when you're using this, because then you have space to pull this back and still feed that through. I don't know that you'd really have enough space if you were just in the front of your sewing machine. So if you don't have a table like this, get creative. Put some books or something that will even up and give you a little bit more even space for feeding all of this when making the ties. I put pink top thread and bobbin thread into my sewing machine. And then I'm going to use a leader fabric, which is just a little scrap piece of fabric. I'm going to start sewing on that. So if you get any bird's nests, they're going to be there, not on your project. I'm going to put this in front. So I'm going to get started. And then sometimes this will pop up. You want to make sure everything stays nice and flat under your presser foot. So I use my scissors. My goal is to sew about 1/8 of an inch from this edge. So as I go, I'm just going to be pulling these back and then using my fingers to flip that down and make sure these two folds stay lined up. I'm doing my best to keep my fingers out of the way so you can see. You can see how it's starting to push up from the foot because I got too close to the edge. Just lift your foot and put it back down if that happens. Have you ever tried one of these tools before? Do you make those jelly roll rugs or do you use this for something else? Let me know in the comments. It's not something I use a lot, but I really like it for things like this. Then I'm just going to cut that leader fabric off. And I sewed back and forth on this starting end, and I should have stopped a little short here because we need to get this end folded under. And I usually do it right as I come to the end, but I forgot. So we'll just grab the seam ripper. You're not really sewing if you're not using your seam ripper, right? So you want to stop about 2 to 3 inches before the end. Stop sewing. You could leave it in your sewing machine instead of having to use your seam ripper. Then flatten that, fold that first section in, second in, and then back in half so that we have a finished edge on one end. So like I said, you could do that if you remember while you're sewing, but because I didn't, I'm just going to start a few stitches back. Then I'm going to hold it down with the scissors so I don't sew my finger. So now we have that. I'm just going to take it to the ironing board and iron that flat. Now you can leave your ties like this, just sewn on the one side. If you prefer the look, you can sew down the other side as well. That's totally personal preference. If you want to do these fast, just sew the one side. If you like the look of both sides, go for it. So here are the 3 ties that we made, and I left these 2 just sewn on one side and then did this one on both sides, just so you can see the difference and decide which way you would want to go when you make your makeup brush holder. I'm going to use the ones that were sewn just on one side. So our next step is to take the lining where we have the fleece on the back, and remember the fleece is butted up to the top. So I'm going to turn it over this way, and this is the top. Now we're going to take our 2 ties and find the raw edges. And I do like to have the seams on the same side when I attach these. Now we're going to measure 8.5 inches down and clip and baste the ties in place. So I stitched about 1/8 of an inch from the edge so that that won't show once we sew this whole thing together. Next, we're going to be putting the outside fabric, the pink, on top of this, but you'll notice these are hanging off the edge. So you just want to fold them back so that they're not going to be in the way when we clip and pin and sew all the way around. Just want to get them kind of flat, make sure they're not getting over to this edge. You want them to just be in the middle. Now the fleece is here, which means this is going to be the pocket section. So we're going to leave about 4 to 5 inches open here because that will be the least noticeable when we turn and close that if you don't get that sewn over perfectly. Now we're going to put these right sides together, matching all the edges. Now sometimes when you add fusible fleece, the size gets a little bit different. The fabric might shrink up a teeny bit. It is not a big deal because, you know, we're not making clothes. So it's not going to mess up the project, but you want to make sure everything is the same size when you sew it because we are going to use 1/4 inch seams. So what I like to do is just put 4 clips so I know it's held in place and these straps are right, and then I turn it over. Because if anything's going to be smaller, it's going to be this lining. I'm also going to sew around with the fleece side up. I feel like that's less stress on the feed dogs. I don't even know if that's a thing, but I feel like it's a thing. So I'm going to put a double clip where I want to stop because I'm going to leave a hole open here. But before I do that, I'm going to trim this little piece off of the outer fabric so that it is even with that lining. So now we're just going to sew all the way around, leaving a space open here. But if you recall from the beginning, I told you I was going to show you a trick for how to get these corners better than just sewing, turning, and cutting. For that, you just need a couple pieces of thread. So I usually take a thread that is pretty bright, is different from the fabric that I'm using, so it's easy to see, and that I don't use very often. So we're going to go with this bright yellow. Definitely not a color that I sew with a lot. So I've just cut 4 pieces, I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 inches long. And when we're at the sewing machine and we get to a corner, I'm going to show you how we're going to use those. So I'm starting pretty close to this corner and I'm going to do 1/4 inch seams. So instead of sewing all the way to a 1/4 inch from this edge, I'm going to stop about 1 stitch shy of a 1/4 inch. I'm going to lift my foot, and I'm going to take one of the yellow threads, and I'm going to just put it in between those 2 pieces of fabric. I'm going to take this clip off too, just so I can get under this a little bit better. I'm going to hold that thread so that I can feel it right up against the needle. And I'm going to put the foot back down. I'm going to take 1 stitch. Then I'm going to lift, and I'm going to pivot. Now I'm going to take both ends of the thread. You don't want to pull one or you will undo this whole process. And we're going to tuck it in and make sure that the thread, see, we can't have that there because we don't want it to get sewn into any other stitches but that one that we just took. Make sure that's tucked nice and tight. And now we're going to keep going to the next corner. It's another step when you're sewing, but it makes the turning and the corners that much better. I think it's worth the time, and you can let me know what you think at the end or when you try it yourself. Now I've gotten back to the 2 clips, which is to remind me that I need to stop sewing close to here to leave space for turning. Now we'll take it and we'll clip those corners, and I will show you the magic with that yellow thread. I forgot to hit record again. Okay, so I clipped the corners, making sure not to go too close to the thread. And now I'm going to turn it right side out and show you the trick with the yellow thread for getting those corners out. All you do is you hold both sides of the thread and you give it a little tug, and look at that. That just comes out so beautifully. And then you're just going to pull one end, and you can use that thread again if you want to. And you're just going to do that to all 4 corners. It is so much easier than taking a turning tool and making your way in there, and it's going to give you a much sharper corner. This is my new favorite way to do it. Like I said, it takes a little bit longer at the sewing machine, but look at the result you get and how quick and easy that is. So you're spending your time one place or the other. Now I'm just going to take that to the ironing board, iron that flat, and iron the portion that we use to turn under. Now I'm just going to sew all the way around the edge, about 1/8 of an inch, just to keep everything in place. And because I'm starting inside the fabric and not off of the fabric, I can't use a leader fabric. So I'm going to raise the bobbin thread. You put your foot down, hold that top thread, needle down, needle up, give a little tug, and that pulls the bobbin thread through the fabric. Then I take tweezers, pull that up, put both under the foot and pull back, and now I'm going to go forward and back a few stitches while holding those threads. That is going to prevent bird's nests or big old knots from having one of the threads sucked back down as you get started. So then once you take a few stitches, you can just let go of that. Now if you're turning a corner and it's kind of thick like this one is where the fleece is, this is what I do to help my feed dogs along. I have some of these pieces of fabric. I made a tube and then I folded it in half. And then I'll just take however many of them I need to balance out the height of the project. So this one looks good. And then I'll put that under my foot. So it just gives the foot and the feed dogs more to work with so it doesn't get hung up on that corner. Now it's time to make the pocket. So you're going to put your lining side up so I can feel the fleece. There's no fleece down here. We're going to be folding this up and then doing stitch lines to form these pockets. You can do the pocket between like 4.5 to 5 inches high. If you know what brushes you're going to be putting in them, you can use them to decide how tall you want these pockets to be. I like to have things sticking out. So I want to make sure that my smallest item is still going to show above the top edge of the pocket. So this is going to work really well for this. So if you want to, you can measure on each side, but you can just as easily fold it up, and if these edges are lined up, then you have it straight. And then you're going to press. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to sew the pocket up. So I'm just going to sew right along the stitch lines that we already have from the top, and we're going to double over down to here. Then I'm going to show you how to figure out where each of these stitch lines go. Now what I like to do is start from the center and work my way out. And the reason is because every once in a while, somebody's seam will be a little bit different. Where you sew this on will be a little bit different. So if you start from one side, you may end up with something too big on one side or a little bit too small. If you start from the center, everything is going to be even. And however big these two outside pockets will be is what they will be. We're going to get 12 different sections into this makeup holder. So the first step, obviously, is to find the center if we're going to start from the center. I'm just going to put a little clip there so I know where that center point is. Now, the way I have designed this is, and the way that's in the pattern that you can get on Etsy, is I put 2 fatter slots in the center instead of on the end. Some people do it on the end. I like them in the center, and I'm going to make them 1 3/4 inches wide each. So we'll do a center line and then 1 3/4 inch to either side, then a 1 1/4, and then 3 1-inch. And then this one is going to probably be about 1 1/2 inches. It'll be what it'll be. I always like to start sewing from the folded edge and then ending by doubling back over this top part. You can either draw lines where you want them with a pencil, a chalk line, a heat erasable pen. I like to use the seam guide that comes with your sewing machine. So what you do is you put it, look in your manual, because yours might work a little bit differently, but usually it goes through the foot somehow. And see, you can make it be any distance you want. We're going to be using these little folded up things, put it under the foot just to help everything move well. And I'm going to be pulling up the bobbin thread each time. You want to make sure this first line is straight because we are going to use it for every other line from there. So you can just use something on the side of your sewing machine, or you can draw that first line. Okay, and because I said I want to start off this end and I want to use this guide, I put it on the wrong side. So let's take it out and reposition it. So usually they show you to do it this way so that this is curved like that, but you can also put it through from the opposite direction. I'm going to use my ruler. And so instead of this kind of being curved on whatever you want to sew off of, it's going to come down, but it will work just the same. So we're going to put this so that it goes right over that stitch line that we just made. And we're going to start the next one. And you're just going to keep doing this until you have all 12 slots done. So let me know in the comments who you might make this for. Are you going to make it for yourself? Are you going to make it as a gift? Are you going to make these to sew and sell? I would love to know. So now that we have that side done, we're going to put this on the other side and we're going to sew these. There are lots of fun ways you could personalize this. If you have a Cricut or other cutting machine, you could put cute makeup, like wake up and makeup sayings on the inside or the outside with the heat transfer vinyl. You could machine embroider. You could hand embroider something. So many ways to go. Let me know if you're just going to keep it simple or if you're going to make it a little extra special. I really like using this sewing machine guide. It's easy, you don't have to draw anything. If you were doing a lot of these, you just keep going. You haven't put anything on the fabric, so there's nothing to get off. So now we have our 12 slots. Let's see what our sides look like. So this is about 1 1/2. That one's just under 1 1/2, closer to 1 1/4. So it's good that we started from the center and worked out. Now it is time to add the brushes and roll it up. Now it is all set. And while I'm sure my daughter-in-law would love to get these brushes in the brush box, I think it's going to be way better inside her own roll-up in her favorite color. I'm actually going to wrap it with the box so she knows they're new. Not that you can't tell, but just in case. So I'm going to put these in here, and then she has room for lots of other things. So the way that this was designed, as far as where these ties are, it's designed so that you fold the flap down just to meet the top of the pocket. So kind of like that. And then you're just going to roll it. Since I don't have anything on that end, I'm just going to fold it like that. Start rolling where my brushes are and tie it in a bow. So what do you think? I mean, you can make this case and just give it to someone assuming they have everything they need, or you can add some of the supplies, maybe new brushes or like makeup pencils or new mascara. This is the perfect gift for the holidays, for birthdays, etc., for teens. This could also be a cool item to sew and sell. So let me know what you're going to do. I'm super excited for the holidays to give this to my daughter-in-law, and hopefully she hasn't watched this video, so she won't already know what it is.
Today I'm going to show you another quick project that is great for stocking stuffers, gifts, girls' trips, family vacations, long plane rides, whatever. It's how to make a simple sleep or eye mask, depending on what you call it. And I'm going to show you how to make it where you fussy cut it to put exactly what you want on your mask, like I did with these snowmen, or to use just a more tossed pattern where it doesn't matter exactly where you put your template. What you need is this template, which is free on my website at tarareed.com/sleep-mask. Then, and this is about just slightly over 9 inches wide, 4.5 inches tall. So this is also a great project for some of your scraps. So I grabbed a piece of the snowman again, but with red. That's going to be the front. Then a polka dot for the back. You can make these, you can do these reversible too. It really doesn't matter which way, so that you could do it that way. You could do it that way. You're just basically flipping the elastic. So do 2 different things so you have options, but I would recommend not doing anything too light, like a white background, especially if someone might have makeup still on their face. Then you need a piece of fusible fleece about the same size, and then a 14-inch piece of elastic. All right, so first let's talk about fussy cutting. So to fussy cut, you need to figure out exactly where you want your designs, and you're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So if it goes over that selvage a teeny bit, it's still going to be okay. So I'm just going to angle that, and I'm just going to keep folding it up so I can see, make sure I'm not too much over the selvage, but that my snowmen are going to be on here and not hitting the seam allowance. Okay, so right like that. Move that there. I like to cut it all together so the size is correct. So then I'm gonna, whoops, don't do that. A little overzealous, my flipping. Okay, then I'm gonna put my backing right side down, because I'm gonna make this, I'm gonna cut this as a sandwich the way it's gonna go, so that when we pin it together, it's going to be good sizing. And then I'm just gonna put that on top of all of it and pin it together. It does tell you on the template what to cut, and then there's a test square, so you want to make sure that is 1 inch by 1 inch before you do the project, because if you didn't choose cut actual size when you printed it, your printer might have made it a little bit smaller, and then you'll have a child size one. So now I'm just going to carefully cut around. All right, so we have that cut out. I'm just going to take the pins out. Okay, isn't that going to be cute how that ended up in the center? So now I'm going to take the fusible fleece. Oh, and I cut it so that it's going to fuse to the back. It doesn't really matter which way. And I'm going to take it over to the ironing board and just press and fuse that together. All right, so I have a different method where you're going to be able to make these really quickly if you're using just a toss pattern where it doesn't really matter what part of the print is going to be on your mask. So what I do in this case is I cut out the fusible fleece. So I cut out a bunch of the mask shape out of the fusible fleece, take some of my scraps of fabric and press the fleece onto the fabric before I cut the fabric. Then I'm going to grab a fabric for the opposite side. I'm going to put that face up. I'm going to put this face down. You also want that to not matter, so just to be a basic print. I'm going to put this face down, making sure that the whole mask is on this, because this piece is obviously wider than that. And then I'm going to pin that together and cut it out. So you could do whole strips of them. Like if you had long strips, you could do 1, 2, 3, 4 and really create a little assembly line. Now that I fused the fleece to the backing, I'm going to put the right side up and I'm going to grab my elastic, and this is just going to be attached straight across. So I'm going to pin that. I'm going to pin it really close to the edge because I just want to double check. I mean, if you're making this for you or your family, always double check the size. Otherwise, 14 inches is a pretty good guess that it's going to work on most heads. But if you want to check the size, just pin it like that. And then I would do it this way so you don't, less likely to stab yourself. Very gently put that on your head to test, but we're going to assume that it's fine. So now there's two ways to do this. You can go and baste the elastic, but in the interest of time, I just will put the right side down on top and then hold that elastic in place, put this down, and make sure I pin through the elastic. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I don't know, I'm all about time efficiency. I'm going to do that. And then you're just going to pin the rest of the way around. All right, then you're going to take it to the sewing machine. You're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I usually double back on the elastic just in case, just to make it a little bit more secure, and leave a section of the flat part at the top open so that you can turn it right side out. Okay, so I left a section open for turning, but before you turn it right side out, you're just going to need to go around the curves and clip so that it's going to turn nicely and give you a smooth curve. And if there are parts that look a little bit thick, you can always trim that back a little bit. I might be a slightly overzealous trimmer, but I figure too much is better than none, and just make sure you're not getting too close or, heaven forbid, cutting through your stitch lines. So now that I have that all trimmed, I'm just going to very gently turn that right side out. And if you flip the fabric where you started and ended and then push through, you're going to put less strain on the edge of that sewing. All right, and then you can just use your fingers to puff that out, or you can use a turning tool. But it's pretty big. You can just rub your finger along that curve. And that is good to go. So now you just need to take it and press the edges and press this under so that when we top stitch, you're not going to see where it was left open. And be very careful not to press your elastic because it might melt. So now this is all pressed, so you can't really see where that opening was, and it is good to go. We're going to top stitch about 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and I put a dark red thread in the top and black in the bobbin so that whichever side you put out, you're not going to really notice that stitch line. And that's all there is to it.
This is going to be one of the best smelling, easy sewing projects you are going to make, as long as you like the scent of dried lavender. We're going to make these eye pillows that are perfect for relaxation, for meditation. If you have a migraine, you can put it in the microwave, heat it up, and make it warm. You can put it in the freezer, make it colder for headaches, whatever you want. So let me show you what you need and how quick and easy these are to make. First, you're going to need 2 pieces of fabric, 9.5 inches wide by 5 inches high. If you were using non-directional fabric, you could grab a long scrap of fabric, fold it in half, and cut. Use the pattern that you can get when you sign up for my newsletter and cut this out. However, if you do that with a directional fabric like this, all of my flower stems are down here, you're going to end up with this. It's going to be the right direction on one side and upside down on the other side. Whoopsie, not a huge deal, but if that bothers you, you want to make sure you cut 2 separate pieces, put them right sides together with the bottom in the same place. The top is up here, the bottom is down here. Then I used a 1/2 cup of dried lavender, and I got that on Amazon, this really big thing. I have a couple more projects in mind for this. If you have a local lavender farm, you can probably get fresh local dried lavender as well. And then flaxseed. And this is whole flaxseed, not ground. It's easier to find ground flaxseed because that's used in cooking, but you want the whole seeds. Ground flax seeds is like putting flour in there. Not a good idea. And the reason I use flaxseed instead of rice is because if you're going to put this in the microwave or the freezer, this isn't going to absorb water the way rice kernels will. But it also still adds a nice little weight and will hold the heat if you heat it longer than rice. However, since you are putting this on your eyes, be really, really careful and just heat it for a few seconds and test it. Then you're going to need to make yourself a paper funnel if you don't have a funnel in your house. That is going to be to put the lavender and flaxseed into the container after we have it sewn together. Regular fabric scissors, pinking shears, or you can snip, snip, snip all these curves with little scissors, some pins, and then of course sewing machine thread. If you're going to want to put this in the microwave, make sure everything is 100% cotton. You also do not want to use starched fabric because this is to go on your eyes and it's supposed to be relaxing. You want it to be soft. You want it to be able to go around your nose and just be really comfortable on your face. Now, I don't sew any kind of channels in this. I let it flow wherever because A, it's easier and faster, and B, if the lavender stops smelling as much, you can just shake it up and it reactivates the scent. Let's get started. I have my 2 fabrics and I am just going to quickly pin my pattern down. Now, if you are in my Sew with Tara Reid membership, you will not only get this template for free, but also written directions with lots of pictures. And if you're a Cricut owner, I also have an SVG file. If you wanted to have your Cricut machine or any other laser cutter or cutting machine cut the shape of the fabric. You can try it for $1. You get 7 days to jump in there, see what you think, decide if you want to stay. Then you can stay monthly, or if you join as an annual member, you pay less and you get a lot more. First, you get the peace of mind of just committing for a year. You don't have to think about it every month. You also get 2 months free when you join for a year, and I send you free fabric, which is a $40 value. I pay the shipping as well. And you get to pick what you want because I want you to have fabric that you're going to want to sew with and use and not just send you something random and you're like, I don't really like that. So I want this to be a really, really good value. I want it to be an easy yes for you to jump in and join me and the other members of sewwithtarareid.com. All right, so we have that all cut out. Take the pins out and then we're going to put the pins back in. You're going to leave the straight top section open. And what I like to do is I like to put 2 pins where I need to stop because, sometimes when you're sewing, you get on a roll and you forget to stop. Not a problem. You can always use your seam ripper, but if you remember to stop, that's just a little bit easier. So I put 1 pin or clips all the way around, and then I put 2 where I want to stop sewing. Now off to the sewing machine. Now we're going to sew all the way around, but leaving an opening for turning and for filling. And we're going to use a 1/4 inch seam. Because flaxseed and dried lavender are pretty small, you need to use a small stitch length like you would if you were sewing quilt blocks. So I'm going to work with a 1.7 stitch length just to make sure nothing is going to fall out. Now my machine also has a handy button where if I push it, it's going to stop with the presser foot up. Amazing function on my little Janome. Now, using a small stitch length also means that it's going to be easier to sew those curves without having to pick your foot up as many times, but you still do a few times. Because this is a standalone thing, if you're not a super consistent 1/4 inch from every edge, it's okay. You just want the basic curves. This shape is really comfortable to have on your eyes because it does have that curve cut out for your nose. However, you can't put it into the wash because it's kind of hard to make a case for something this shape. Let me know in the comments if you would like to see another tutorial where we make one that is a rectangle with a removable case that you can wash. If you are going to use this when you have a lot of makeup on, I would just put a tissue down between this and your face to keep it cleaner. Now that we have that sewn, we're going to need to clip the curves. If you don't have pinking shears, I highly recommend you invest in them. I use them a lot for clipping corners, and I really like these Fiskars. Because of the grip that they have, it's much easier on your thumb than a more traditionally shaped scissor. I think they call it their Easy Action, and I will have a link below the video to find this on Amazon if you're interested. If you don't have this and you just want to do it the traditional way, you're just going to grab your small scissors and you're going to put itty bitty cuts into the fabric just to ease that fabric up. So then when you turn it right side out, the fabric is going to be able to spread out like that and give you that nice curve. If you don't do it, it's going to make little weird points. But definitely the easier way to go is to use pinking shears, cut close, but not on your stitches, and just go on all of the curves. Do not cut on the area that we left open for turning and filling because we're going to need to fold that under and sew that shut. So So you want to stop before you get to where that opening is. Now we're just going to turn that right side out. If you want to, you can press this so that those curves stay out, but I just want this to be a quick and easy project, so I'm just going to do it with my fingers. And then I'll just let the things we're going to put in there do the work for me. Next, we're going to grab our paper funnel. You're going to put that in that fabric, and then you're going to pour the lavender and the flaxseed in there. And make sure you make the top of your funnel as big as your container. The first time I did this, this was not as wide, and I ended up with half the lavender on my workspace. Then just slowly kind of shake it because you need the lavender to move from the bottom. There we go. And then I'm just going to kind of push it to both sides so it's not in the way of the flaxseed. And then we're going to do the same thing with that. And I think I told you, but I'm doing about 1/2 cup of each. You can do more, you can do less, just kind of decide what feels right for you. And just kind of push that to the two sides, because now we want to sew this closed. We'll be able to mix it together by just shaking it later, but now we need to fold these edges under the area that we left open, and we're going to pin this closed and sew across. Now I want to give you a little tip about doing this. I do my pins at an angle when I'm going to be sewing closed, especially when there's small stuff that might try and sneak out while I'm sewing, because then you can sew with your needle closer to the pin than if you had it straight. You can get all the way up here, like right here, and it's still, this needle is still holding it here. You can do that all the time, but I especially do it when I'm closing things like this. All right, 3 pins should be good. Now you'll notice on this one, I didn't take the time to change the thread to match the fabric. I wish I had. So this one's going to look a little bit better because the white thread that I have in my sewing machine is going to just blend right in with that fabric. And now, still with the short stitch length so that none of the flaxseed and lavender comes out, we're going to sew this opening closed. And for this, you want to pull up your bobbin thread so that you don't have a knot on the back of your eye pillow. So hold that top thread. Put your needle down, lift it, give the top thread a little yank. I always keep tweezers by my sewing machine to pull that up because then I'm not grabbing my finger on the needle regularly. And it also helps me push that top thread under the foot. So get both of the threads under the foot, hold them, and then just sew forward and back a few stitches to knot. And sew a few more stitches before you let go of that thread to make sure your machine doesn't, by mistake, pull that under. Never sew over your pins, but like I said, you can get really close when they're at an angle. And you want to try and keep your flaxseed and your lavender away from the presser foot and the edge. You don't want it falling into your machine, and you really don't want to sew it either. That is how easy it is. Now, to mix the flaxseed and the lavender, just kind of move it with your fingers, push it to one end, push it to the other. It'll just mix in there, and that will also activate the scent. It smells so good in here. I wish you could smell it. So I think you can whip these up in probably 10 minutes or less. So this is a great quick scrap fabric project. This would be perfect for Mother's Day, for anyone that you know that suffers from migraines, or a mom that just wants to relax. Just imagine putting the little bit of weight and the lovely scent of lavender if you're in the bathtub, or you're meditating, or at yoga, or going to sleep. Since it doesn't take very long, it would also be a great project to sew and sell if you want to make money for vacation, for supplies, for a new sewing machine, whatever it is. So I would love to know what you think, who you're going to make it for first. Let me know in the comments, and happy sewing. My son was a victim of crime. This is my son. He recently had his phone taken right out of his hand in London. If Oliver Twist was in London today, he'd be wearing a black hoodie, a black mask, driving an e-bike, and swiping your phones. Just ask him. In this tutorial, I'm going to teach you how to make an adjustable crossbody strap that hooks to a little phone tether. So if you are in a big city or somewhere where you're nervous about your phone being stolen, but you still want to be able to look at it and have it out of your pocket or your purse, this is going to make it so much safer. So let me show you how easy these are to make. You need 2 strips of fabric, 2.5 inches wide, by width of fabric. So if you're a fan of roly-polies or jelly rolls, as Moda calls them, 2 of these strips is going to make 1 of these adjustable straps. Or you can just cut them off of anything. To keep it simple, I'm just going to use the same fabric, so I only have to sew them together once, just like you would sew together quilt binding. But if you want to have a bit more fun with it, go for it. Then you need a phone tether. So I found this on Amazon. There will be a link above me in this video and also a link in the description to show you where you can get these. I did a lot of research after my son's phone was stolen in London and tried to decide what I wanted to do so that I could have my phone out next time I was there. And the way this works, this is sticky under that white part. You just open your phone case, it sticks in there, and then this part, it's kind of fabric, comes out through the hole where you charge. So you have to have a phone case where it's solid up here. So if it's just cut out that whole way, they said this won't work because it'll probably lift up somehow. I don't know. I'm just telling you what the directions said. I've had this on here for a little bit. It hasn't impacted my ability to charge my phone at all. So see, it just sits right there. It's kind of a fabric. It looks nice and sturdy. So I really like this solution. And then I figured out how to make this strap. So we only needed one lobster clasp, but if you wanted to use one maybe that you're using for something else, like this one is from a water bottle. So it's adjustable, pretty much the same length, but it has two lobster clasps. So you would just hook on both of them. But my goal with this tutorial is use as few materials as possible and get this job done. That is why we only need one lobster clasp. I'm using 3/4 inch lobster clasp and a 3/4 inch slide. So the first thing we are going to do is we are going to get these two pieces of fabric into one long strip of fabric. Then we're going to press it. So let's head over to the sewing machine. If you're a quilter, you're just going to put these two pieces together just like you would be making binding for your quilt. You can just jump ahead. If you've never done that, I'm going to walk you through it really quickly. So I'm going to take one of my strips and I'm going to have it face up. Then I'm going to take my other strip and I'm going to put it face down so that we have these two strips right sides together. Now I'm going to put them one on top of each other at a 90-degree angle. And I want to see a little bit of the edge. We also have to get that selvage off. We don't want that as part of our phone strap. And it's going to make this next step easier. So now I'm just going to take a ruler and I'm going to draw a line between these points. So a diagonal line that goes from where these two fabrics intersect here to where they intersect here. Now, if you're new to this, you might want to put a pin and a pin. I can practically do this in my sleep, so I'm just going to very carefully twist that, put my foot down, and sew straight on that line. So we have those sewn together, and it's going to go in a straight line. Now we just need to trim and do a bit of ironing. Now I'm just going to trim a 1/4 inch to the outside of that stitch line. And I love this trim it ruler from Riley Blake because the blue is exactly a 1/4 inch. You don't have to do a lot of thinking, just line it up with that stitch line and cut. I'm also going to take my scissors and cut these little triangles that go over the edges. Those are called dog ears because we do not want them on when we sew further. Now off to the ironing board. The first thing we are going to do is we are going to open up that seam. We're going to press that seam allowance flat. Now, the next thing we need to do with this very long strip of fabric, it should be about, 82, 84 inches long, is we're going to need to press it so that these two raw edges come into the center. And then we're going to press it again, fold it in half so that the raw edges are inside, and then we're going to sew. Now, there are two ways to do this. One is to just fold, press, fold, press, fold, press. So if you wanted to do that, you would fold it in half and you would press all the way along the strip. Then you would open it up and you would press each raw edge right into that crease line without pressing the crease out of it. So that's 1, 2, this is our third press. And again, you'd have to do this the whole length of the fabric. Then we would fold it in half and we would press again. So that's how you're going to do it if you just have an iron and you don't have this tool that I am going to show you next. It's basically a big bias tape maker and it's designed for 2.5 inch strips of fabric. This is going to cut down on 2 of those 4 pressings. So what you're going to do is you're just going to put that in there, try and put the center in the center and just kind of use this awl to push the fabric through. Pull it out the other side. Then you want to get it pretty even, how it's feeding in there, because then it comes out this side and it is automatically folding these 2 raw edges into the center. This is a huge time saver. I think these are about $10 to $12. To me, very worth the investment. I do use them for lots of different projects. So then we are just going to press all the way along. Now, one thing that I have found, often when I am making bias tape or double fold bias tape, I will starch this because then it holds the shape a little bit better and it holds the crease a little bit better. But I don't want this neck thing to be scratchy and stiff. So I just work with slightly less formed fabric. So what I usually do is I'll pull back quite a bit and then I will just use my fingers and make sure it's feeding pretty evenly, because with this bigger one, I feel like sometimes one side becomes larger than the other and we want it as even as possible. So I kind of do about, what's that, about maybe 6 inches, 6 to 8 inches. And then I press and then I just keep moving along in that way until we get the whole thing pressed. See, now it twisted. So just watch how it's coming out. Just go back this way and you can just push that forward. That honestly usually does not happen. Of course it happened now. But that's okay, because then I could show you how to fix that. And this is honestly the part of the project that takes the longest. Okay, so we have that pressed all the way. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this backwards so that those raw edges are showing. And I'm going to stitch 1/4 inch from the edge on each end, and that's going to make a really nice end. So I'm going to go get that stitched and I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you how we're going to flip and twist that. It's so much easier than folding it and hoping that it works. It's less bulky and you just get a better finished corner. You can see that I sewed it the opposite way that I ironed it, right? So the raw edges, when we're ironing it and when we sew it together and it's finished, the raw edges will be on the inside. Do the ends, we want the raw edges up and out. Now I'm just going to take my scissors and I'm going to trim that corner where the folds are. And then I'm going to flip that and look at that beautiful corner. Well, it'll be beautiful once we push it up. You have to be careful if you use scissors because they are pretty pointy. I'm just kind of pushing this whole edge to push that up. Make sure all those little threads are in. And then you can just kind of push that down a little bit so you get a nice 90-degree corner. And then you're going to press that. I love that way of finishing ends. Trim both sides. That made it much faster and easier to do that 90-degree. Just going to press that. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine. We're going to sew down both sides. So that will be sewing this shut and then also sewing the other side, just so it looks aesthetically nice and it will stay nice and flat. I've put in top and bobbin thread that matches my fabric because I want the stitching to be subtle and not really stand out as part of the design. I'm going to use a leader fabric. I just make a couple of these little folds so that I have different widths. Like later I'm going to use 2 of them. But right now, if I put one behind there, it's going to be about the same distance. Putting that behind the fabric like that before you get started helps your machine work better because now it has something for the feed dogs to grab onto. And your presser foot isn't angled, it's nice and flat. So I am going to pull up my bobbin thread. Just put the needle down. Hold the thread while I put the needle up, pull up the bobbin thread, put it under that foot, and then I'm going to go forward and back a few stitches to knot that. And then you'll see that just pops right out. You don't even sew on your leader fabric. At least in this instance, I didn't. Now I'm going to sew down the one long side and up the other side. Now it's time to put on the slide and the lobster clasp. The first step is to put on the slide. What we're going to do is we're going to have the back up. We're going to put our strap through down, and then we're going to put it up like that. We're going to have it about 2 inches beyond our slide, and then we're going to fold it back, going to clip it, and then you're going to sew this in place. And I'm going to do a box. So I'm going to sew this, and the diagonals just so it is nice and strong. Now, because this is pretty fat, if I didn't use any kind of leader fabric, my presser foot would really be bending when I was sewing this together. So I'm going to take 2 of these little folded pieces that I make and just keep handy so that I can put that right behind there. And see how that's pretty much now the same thickness. So I'm going to put that there. And then the back of my presser foot and also my feed dogs can use that to help everything move along nicely. And I'm going to pull up my bobbin thread. And then I also have a machine that I can set so that it will stop with the foot raised, which is really helpful when you're doing little boxes like this. Otherwise, you just have to keep raising it. So however your machine works, do that. I need to keep putting that in here as we move around this box. So now you can see I made a box with an X in the middle, so that is going to be nice and secure. Now we're going to put the lobster clasp on, and we're going to be looping this through our slide again. So this is where we're going to have to be careful and make sure that we're not having this twisted as we put this together. So it's a little bit of a pain because it's pretty long, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use my fingers, flatten that out, put the lobster clasp on. This first one actually doesn't really matter. Okay, so we're going to move that. Now we have it flat. Bring this here, and I'm going to put it through the slide. And I'm going to pull it all the way through. And I just have the lobster clasp a few inches from the slide because we want to make sure that doesn't happen. We don't want this to be twisted. So if it is twisted, just fix it. You can move this lobster clasp around if you need to, but you want to make sure that it's nice and flat and in the same direction. Now we're going to flip this over, and we are going to make sure we have this side on top in our hand. So I'm going to do this. That out of the way. So this is this part. And then we're going to turn it, and we're going to put it right through the other side of the slide. You can see now I can go like this. We want to make sure that that isn't twisted. So now we have our slide. So we can pull this to make it longer or shorter, and this lobster clasp will move. So like that. So that's all set. If we were doing one with clips on both ends, it would honestly be a little bit easier, but we only really need one for the phone, and it's very doable. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn this back over so that the back of the slide is up. And then I'm going to put this through the lobster clasp again. You'll end up doing this probably twice. You're going to have both of these on here. So it's going to kind of go like that, which is fine. Or when you have it on, they might overlap like that. But for now, we're going to kind of pull them apart. But we want to make sure that the back, which is where you can see the end of the fabric folded over, where it's sewn, versus that, you just see the sewing and not the end. We want to make sure they're on the same side. So we don't want this one on this side and then this one flipped the other way. Hopefully that makes sense. So I'm going to hold that because I don't have a clip handy, and I'm just going to pull this and make sure it isn't twisted, because you want to make sure it's not twisted before you sew this. Now we're going to go back to the sewing machine and do the same thing. We're just going to sew that on with a box and the X in the center. And there you have it. It looks just like a lanyard, but you don't want it to be a lanyard because you don't want somebody yanking and pulling on your neck. And also, I'm going to be wearing this in London, where these phone thieves are running rampant on their little e-bikes, and lanyards without breakaway clasps are not legal in the UK. So a breakaway clasp would just kind of defeat the purpose of having this, because they could just yank and take your phone and your strap. So this is designed to go crossbody over one shoulder, not around your neck. So then you would just take that and clasp that onto your phone tether, and you are good to go. So I'm really excited for my trip to go see my son, and I'm going to make a couple different ones to go with different outfits. These, I think, are great for any kind of a city situation, concerts, you know, if you're just hiking and you just want to be able to sling your phone over your shoulder. So let me know what you think. If you're going to try this, where you might wear them. I think this could be a great thing to sew and sell. There's a link below the video to get these tethers. I think they're great. It came in a 4-pack. So I am making them for some of my friends. And I hope you subscribe to my channel. I do lots of easy sewing projects, practical sewing projects like this, quilt block tutorials, quilting, and other things. Stay safe, don't let anyone grab your phone, and happy sewing. I like to do projects that use pre-cuts like this so that if you have any laying around, you can use them. So you're going to need 2.5 inch times width of fabric, which means from selvage to selvage, for the adjustable strap. Then we're going to cut 2.5 inch pieces off of one of them to make this little tab that holds the D-ring, because our adjustable strap is going to have these lobster claws on the bottom so that you can take them off if you want to. Throw them on a different bag. Then we're going to need 2 outside fabrics, 2 inside fabrics, a pen, because we're going to need to write on our fabric a little bit, a turning tool, rotary cutter, you know, the basics, clip. Now this is the hardware. The hardware that you need for the strap, you need 2 D-rings, 2 lobster clasps, and 1 glide, or some people call it a tri-slide buckle, I guess manufacturers or whatever. We're going to call it a slide because it's easier to say. You need to make sure they're all the same size. And the way you measure these is you measure the inside. So inside here, not the outside of the metal, but inside of the metal. So mine are 3/4 inch, and it's perfect for using the 2.5 inch strips. You can see it could have, the strap could have been a little bit wider, but it works really well. When I do mine, I just do 2 pieces of fabric. So they're really kind of floppy, but I use them when I go walking at the mall most mornings. So it's half hour to an hour, not going on some big hike where I need to insulate it. If you want it padded or you want it insulated, you can use something like this. This is called Insul-Bright. And this reflective part keeps heat in and out. So it will keep things cold or hot longer than just using fabric. If you want to do that, you would just cut it the same sizes, put it together the same way, and you would be putting together 3 layers instead of 2 like we're going to do today. This is the directions. It's 10 pages with everything you need to know, all of the measurements, how to put it all together. So first, let's talk about the size. So water bottles come in many shapes and sizes. So we have like our little water bottle, the disposables, all different kinds of these. And then of course, get this in the beloved Stanley cup. This kind of water bottle holder is not for a cup with a big handle like this. That's just going to have to be for another day. I have designed the size to fit an insulated water bottle, and I like mine to fit kind of loosely. So you can see it's not going to be hard to get in and out of there, and it comes up to the top. So if you want something different, we'll talk about how you can adjust the size of the bag. I have a video on YouTube. I looked at it the other day and I kind of cringed because it was when I was still using my iPhone, didn't have my high-tech stuff. I gave one of the samples from that video from like 2 or 3 years ago to one of my friends, and she very quickly discovered it fits wine. So, you know, you put whatever you want in your bottle holder. She uses it for picnics, like when they take a picnic, she throws her wine in there, and so I thought I would share that little tidbit if you are a wine lover. So this is going to be our outside. So we have 2 pieces, 7 by 13, and we're going to put them right sides together, and then we are going to cut 1.5 inch squares out of the bottom. This is my favorite way to do a box bottom corner because even though you have to cut in the beginning, it makes the lining up and sewing part much easier. And our box bottom is 3 inches wide. So we need to cut half of that out of each corner so that the bottom becomes that. So you can use any kind of ruler. And what I do is I just put that there, grab a pen, draw on those corners. And then I usually just cut them with scissors because trying to use a rotary cutter and not overcut is a little difficult. The next thing you do is you sew down both sides and across the bottom. So this is going to be our exterior fabric. You do not do anything with this part. And then for the lining, you're going to leave an opening about 3 inches on one side. So presto magico, I already did that because I know you guys know how to sew straight lines, right? So I have sewn down both sides, and then I press the seams open on the bottom as well. And on the lining, even though this is open here, you want to press that seam over the opening because when we're done, and we turn it, you want to be able to either machine or slip stitch that close. So sides are done, that is pressed. Now I'm going to show you how this magically makes boxed corners. So what you're going to do is these corners, the inside corner, we're going to pull that out, and they are going to be the outside of the boxed corner. You're going to match your seams, making sure they stay open. Put a little clip there. You're going to pull that out and just make sure that is straight, that it's not like bunching. This way of doing this is so much easier, and I know in other tutorials that I've done on YouTube and some that I have on Etsy, it shows you a different way to do it, but this is a lot easier if you know the size of the bottom that you want. Since I know you guys know how to sew straight lines, you would just sew straight across 1/4 inch from the edge, and you would do that on all 4 sides. So you have the lining and the outside, 2 sides each. Presto changeo, it's done. This is going to be my outside. And so I've turned it right side out, and then you want to just make sure you push those corners so that they are out. And then this is my lining. Now we're going to put that aside for a quick second. I'm going to show you how I made the D-ring tabs. So when we have our strap fabric, and I'm going to show you how to put that together later, pick one of them and cut 2 2.5 inch squares off the end. These are going to make the little tabs for the D-rings. All you do is you fold it in half, wrong sides together, and press it. Then you open that up and you fold these raw edges. That's the center crease. You fold these raw edges into the center and you press that, and then you fold that in half, you press that, and then you sew down both sides. Once you've done that, you loop it through the D-ring and baste the bottom. Brings us to our next step. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your D-ring, and this is the lining, and you're going to put it on the inside. This is really important. I can't tell you how many times, probably at least 3, that I've done this. I've just been moving along like, okay, pin it to the lining, and I put it here. Well, that's going to put it on the inside of the bag. So make sure you're putting it on the right side of the fabric, just centered over that seam. All right, and then I'm just going to baste these 2 onto here, about 1/8 of an inch from the edge so that the basting doesn't show when we sew this all together. So while I am at the sewing machine, I want you to tell me in the comments what kind of wine you like, or what kind of water bottles you use too. Like, do you use reusable ones? And I'm not knotting this at all because this is literally just holding it in place so it doesn't move when we put the rest of the bag together. Now we have the exterior right side out. The lining is still inside out. And we are going to put the exterior fabric into the lining. Now, if you were doing an insulated holder, you would put the insulation together in the same way. So you're going to cut it the same size, you're going to sew, you're going to make the back box corners. You would put the insulation in here now, and then you would add the exterior. Now I'm doing the same, basically the same thing that we did making the box corners. I'm going to line up the seams. Always start there. So seam number 1, seam number 2. You have to kind of go like that because obviously the D-ring is in the way. And then I always just kind of stand that up and just pull with my fingers just to get the top edges lined up. And then I put another clip on each side. Now, the beauty of doing this with the hole in the lining for turning is we don't have to worry about leaving anything open on the top. We're not pressing both sides of the top in. We're doing it the easier way. And we're going to just sew straight around beginning to end. We're also going to double back on the seams to add extra durability and strength to where these D-rings are, because that is where most of the stress is going to be when you're using this. Now we have a little bit of a lump here, and the seam. So I want to make sure that this stays down and that the foot doesn't bend anything, but I don't want to sew my finger. Knock on wood, haven't done that yet. Many people have. So I always use my scissors, or you can use like a turning tool or whatever you want, a pen, but always have something to help you get that under the foot correctly. So we just went over the D-ring. Now I'm going to back up. And you might have a sewing machine where you can take the arm off and this can wrap around it so that you're sewing from the top. My machine is more of an industrial one, so I can't do that. That's why I always sew from the inside. Now we have the top sewn together, so we're just going to find that opening that we left in the lining, and we're going to turn this all right side out. And then get in there and push those corners out. We already did that for the front. So now it's like we have this big snake, but we need to close this hole before we put the rest of this together. So for time's sake, I'm just going to stitch really close to the edge and close that up. Because this could be seen if you decide to put it right side out, I am going to pull up the bobbin thread. Here's a quick review. Put your foot down, hold the top thread, put the needle down, still hold the top thread, pick it up, give that top thread a little yank, and then you see the bobbin thread popped up. I always keep tweezers by my sewing machine because it's perfect for grabbing these and pulling them up. You can do it with your fingers, but then you end up stabbing the top of your finger a lot and it's just not good. So now I can just go forward and then go back to knot that. And because I am holding both the top and the bobbin threads, it's not going to create any kind of a bird's nest or knot on the bottom. Outside lining, we're just going to push the lining inside. I'm just pushing this to get those corners lined up. Just, getting everything nice and smooth. So the next thing you would do is you would just work to get this seam all the way to the top. And often to do that, I'll just kind of roll my fingers on it because you don't want it bent over. You want it to be nice where just the lining and just the outside. So nothing is overlapped, nothing is tucked in. And then you would just press that. I'm using my cute little Cricut presser today. So you would press all the way around that, and then you would just sew that edge just to hold it. And then I also go back and forth a second time to really make that nice and stable. I think you know how to do that. So we are now going to move on to the straps. If you quilt at all, we're going to make this long strip, just like you would put together binding for a quilt. You're going to have these two fabrics that you've chosen, and you can have them match if you want to. I just think it's kind of fun to have it change, so it's the same, but changes color. Makes it a little more interesting. You could also make this out of a ton of scraps. You could do little squares, do angles. I'm just going to show you how to do it out of 2. The main thing is you need to get it to the length. All right, so we line up this, we leave a teeny bit here, and then take a ruler and draw a line from that point to that point, because we're going to sew straight across. Now, when you're doing this part or any kind of quilting, you want to lower your stitch length. I usually do 1.8 to 2.0, whereas standard machine will do 2.4 to 2.6. And that's partly because you're not knotting anything, so you really need nice close stitches to give you those lines and then also make sure it's not going to fall apart. So I just sewed right on that line. Before you cut, you always want to double check if you're using directional and make sure it's correct, because sometimes you do it upside down. And if you've already cut it, then you're going to have a shorter piece because you're going to have to cut stuff off. So now I'm putting my ruler or the 1/4 inch mark on the stitch line and just trim that off. I'm going to set that seam, which basically means press it, gets all the air out of anywhere. So now we're going to turn that over, kind of pull it so it's not loose, open that seam. I just finger press it and then press it. So pretend this is really long, because when you get your 3 pieces together, it's going to be about 55 to 57 inches long. I don't think you want to see me iron that much, so that's why we're playing with practice pieces. There's 2 ways to do it, with or without bias tape makers. These are a great investment. They're not expensive. This comes in a set, usually of 4 or 5 different sizes. This one, it's designed for 2.5 inch wide strips of fabric. So you'll notice it's the same length, almost the same width that comes out. This one's a teeny bit wider, but the space is way more. See how skinny that is? And even on this side, like there's way more room than on this one. Now, have I used one of these on strips like this before and made it work? Yes, I have. But if you're gonna do a bit of it, get this puppy. I think it's $10 or less. And what this is going to do, it is going to help us fold these raw edges to the center super fast. This is not starched, so it is going to be a lot trickier to get in here, and it's not going to press quite as well. And I'm using an awl, which is like a mini ice pick in my opinion, and that helps slide it through. You make sure your fabric is coming up each side evenly, so it's feeding evenly. Pull it back a little bit and make sure that this is going evenly as well, meaning these 2 raw edges are hitting the center. So once you get that started, you can use a regular iron. This is just throws off less heat and is easier to see. You just slowly pull this back and press as you go. And look at that. Everything's in the center. Now, let's say you don't have one of these and it's 11 o'clock at night and you just want to do this and you're like, Tara, I don't want to wait. Then you would do the same technique as we did for the D-ring loops. You would fold it in half, press, you would open it up, fold both of these raw edges in, and usually you have to do one at a time because it's really hard to hold it when it's not being held by anything else, and press it. So these tools make this a lot faster, and you're going to use them for a lot of different things. So if you don't have them, get them. Then once that is done, pretend that's done, you're going to then fold it in half again and press. Now I'm going to teach you something amazing. So we have this folded. Now we're going to take the ends and we're going to fold them back so that the right sides are together, okay? That's the right sides in there. We've matched these folded edges. This is the center fold and the raw edges. Now we're going to quickly sew that. And because it's so short, I just go all the way forward and then all the way back. And you're going to do this on both ends of your strap. So this is the inside because we're going to flip this. So I'm going to take my scissors and just cut a little triangle off of there. And then I'm just going to flip it. Look at that. Amazing. I'm going to take my little turner, just gently push that, especially since I cut it. Sometimes you have to just manipulate that a little bit so that it goes straight. Press that. I don't know. I think that is a fun, easy way to do that. Let me know if you've ever done that before. I don't remember where I saw it, but I love it. So that is what I did when I made this really long strip. So then you just are going to sew down both sides, which again, I didn't think you wanted to see me sew a gajillion inches, so I pre-did it. Now I'm going to show you how to get the hardware on to make this an adjustable strap. This is the slide. There's a front and a back. And the difference is basically whether you can see the folded over metal or not. So this side is bent, this side has the folds. So this is really the back. So we're going to put the wrong side of the slide up. If your strap has a right or wrong side, like if you were doing a bigger one and maybe you use nylon webbing and put fabric on top of it, then there would be a front and a back. For us, no front or back, so it really doesn't matter. I'm going to put that through there, move that back, do that. You put it through so that the slide part is on top and it's looped. We don't need it through that much. We need about 2 inches over. And now we are going to sew that together. You basically need it over enough that your presser foot isn't going to get hung up on that metal piece. And I am going to do the raise the bobbin thread because you will see both sides of this process. And then I'm also going to sew it in a square and then an X in the middle just so it's nice and strong. So now it is time to thread this stuff together. So this is the trickier part. And the main thing you need to remember when you're doing this is to pay attention to not having this twist when you're putting it together. So we have the slider on the one end. Now we're going to take a lobster clasp and we're going to put that on here. And because it can swing around, it doesn't really matter right now. We're just going to put that, a few inches away. Now things start to matter. We're going to turn it over. I'm going to consult this one. And I'm going to be pulling this to make sure I'm keeping this all the same way and don't twist it. This is really where it's important not to have it twisted. And I'm going to thread the other side through the top of the slider. So now you have the slider. This lobster clasp just hangs out. It's not sewn together because if it is, then you can't move anything. So this one is free floating. Now we're going to go to the other side and we're just going to do the same thing, but you know how that works, so I'm not going to do it. So now we have an adjustable strap. So it has the clasps on both ends, the slider in the middle, and all you do is you hook it on to the D-rings. And this is just a great skill to have for anything. You could, make all different sizes, use it for all different types of bags. Now, I want to show you one other thing. So there's lots of ways to dress this up and make it even better for yourself. And that is by adding accessories. And there are tutorials for all of these things. So like this is a lip balm holder and it is with a key fob and a keychain. So the way you would hook that on is you would put it onto the lobster clasp. Now, I would take this off if you're going to use, like, hook your key fob or whatever on here. Take it off, put this together, and then put it through so that the clasp goes through the key fob hook first, so that this hangs on the outside. Because if you did it the other way, it would be inside with your water. But maybe you want that, so it's not flapping about. Then this is one of these little envelopes, and I did this one with a lobster clasp. I did it both ways. So this way, you could just hook that right onto the D-ring. So lots of ways you can carry a little bit of money on your walk, have your chapstick, have your Burt's Bees. That's what I like. Also put your keys on there. So this is another reason I like having these D-rings, because then you can add all kinds of little things on there. So I think we're done. Wow. We got the water bottle holder. You learned how to do boxed corners if you haven't done that before. And then we made the adjustable strap, which is great because some days you might want it higher, like you might want to put it over one shoulder, you might want to do it crossbody, or if you have different people that use it that are different sizes, they can make it perfect for themselves. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how easy it is to make fabric trays with snaps. So when you store them, they store flat. This will take up barely any space at all, so you can make them for all the fun occasions. Make them for the holidays, make them just because, make them for your friends, make them for teachers. Super, super simple, beginner-friendly project. I demonstrate how to use this big size, which is perfect for rolls or bread at a dinner party. Use them at picnics, things like that. But I'm going to show you how to fussy cut, how to take a print, decide exactly what you want in the center, and leave nothing to chance. Otherwise, this is all straight stitching, a little bit of ironing, so easy. Who wants to get started on these amazing fabric baskets or trays? Let's start by talking about supplies. Here is everything we're going to need, except for the ironing board and sewing machine, to make these cute little fabric baskets. So I'm going to be using fabric clips. You can also use pins. Of course, rotary cutter, we need 2 pieces of fabric. I'm going to be using cam snaps. I'm going to show you how to use washi tape to create guidelines that are going to be really helpful to make this quick and easy. A turning tool. And then if you sign up for my newsletter, you can get this for free with this chart and these very handy templates. So what I did was I cut them out and I laminated them, and then I can just use them over and over again. You basically take the awl that comes with your cam snap set, push it through the circles that are marked for where to place those snaps on these baskets. So I'll show you how those work. And again, you can sign up for my newsletter and get that. There'll be a link below this video to do that. I also have the full pattern with lots of pictures and written description in my Etsy shop, so I will give you that link as well. So for each fabric basket, you need 2 pieces of fabric, and I show you how to do 3 sizes, either using a 15-inch square, 12-inch square, or 8-inch square, and I'm going to be demoing the 15-inch square. So I have a 15-inch square. This is what I'm going to use for the outside of my basket. Then I have a 15-inch square, or slightly under 15-inch square, of fusible fleece. I usually use the Pellon 987F. And then I have a big piece of my main print from my Better to Wake at the Lake collection, and I'm going to show you how to fussy cut this so you have exactly what you want in the center of your basket. So like this is the small one. So I'm going to show you how to put exactly what you want in the bottom part once it's snapped together by fussy cutting this piece of fabric. You can use a regular ruler, but what I'm going to use is this nice big 16.5-inch square from Creative Grids. It just makes this process faster and easier. You can use a regular ruler and the measurements on your mat if you don't have this, but sometimes it's fun to see how different tools work and how they make your life faster. Okay, first we need to decide exactly what we want on the inside of our basket and what portion of this fabric we want in the center. I'm going to look at this chart. So we're going to cut a 15-inch square. The inside square is going to measure 9.5 inches. So you need to be paying attention to both of those numbers as we work with this ruler. So one thing that's cool about this ruler is it has, in the white circles, it has inches, 10, 9, 8, 7. In the black circles, it marks the ½ inch. So if you were cutting a square that was 15.5 inches, you would work off of these 2 sides, but I'm going to work off of these because we're cutting a 15-inch square. I'm going to take a piece of painter's tape and I'm going to put it right along that 15-inch mark on both directions, because then we're going to see exactly what we're cutting and we won't be distracted or confused by that extra 1.5 inches. Okay, so now this is going to be our square. We just disregard everything past the painter's tape. Now, you could also do that for the height of the side. So the sides are going to be 2.5 inches. Let's try it. This would be good to do if you were going to make a bunch of these, but it's a lot of tape if you're just making one. So anyway, if we want to mark this, we would do it 2.5 inches from that tape on all 4 sides. So this is going to be, well, I'm going to put it on the inside. Let's see. I don't want to block what we're looking at. So I'm putting this to this side of the 2.5 inch mark. And I like using this tape because it doesn't have a lot of adhesive on it, so it is not going to leave any residue on my ruler. And I'm also going to show you how to use it on the sewing machine when we are sewing these lines. And we don't even have to go all the way over because we're basically just taping out this center section, which is what we're going to be fussy cutting. Okay, so how cool is that? We now see the full size that we're going to cut, and now we can see what is going to be in the center. And when I say in the center, that means everything that's inside this yellow or orange, whatever you want to call that square, is what is going to show on the bottom of your basket or tray when you snap it together. So you can decide what part you want. You love this saying the best days. The best days include sunshine and lake water. Then you can put that right in the center. And then you can also see what else you're going to get. So let's just take a look at some other options that we have on this piece. And I purposefully cut this larger than 15 inches so that I would have some leeway. I move this like this. I'm going to have the whole bass, this saying, the go jump in a lake, all these things. There's not a lot that's going to be cut off, but it will be on the sides. So remember, everything you're seeing here is going to fold up the sides. So it's not like we're cutting all this off, it's just going to fold up. So this is what I've decided I want. Now, because this is so big, I couldn't put it on a rotary mat, but I'm making sure that everything is on my cutting mat. And I'm gonna start by just getting this whole thing smaller. I know this is not the edge that we're going to be using, but I need to get started. So that just helped me get this piece out of my way because it's a lot to spin around. Now we need to cut these 2 sides, and then we're going to turn it 180 degrees to get the 15-inch square. We're going to line up the sides that we just cut with the painter's tape. Or if this is the only one you're going to do, you can take that off and line it up with the actual 15-inch line. But I'm just double checking that that's correct. And I'm going to keep this tape on here so I can whip up a few more for holiday gifts. So again, I'm just going to keep this flat, and I'm going to cut these sides off. Very cool tool. I love how we can tape that up, make it nice and easy. So doing this fussy cutting is the most complicated and slightly time-consuming way to make these baskets, but I wanted to show you how it worked because you're going to be able to easily figure out how to do it with just 2 pieces of fabric where you really do not have to worry about how you cut it. I just cut these fish and I cut this design. They're both random patterns, so where you cut doesn't matter. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this to my ironing board and I'm going to fuse the fleece to the back side of the outer fabric. You can do it to either fabric, the inner or the outer, because we are going to quilt this a little bit to make sure that it stays really well. I'm going to go fuse this following the manufacturer's instructions, and I will be right back. Now this piece of fusible fleece is well secured to the wrong side of my outer fabric. I'm going to grab my clips. I'm going to put my fabrics right side together. Just line those up. And now I am going to clip. You can also pin because we are just going to sew all the way around the outside of this 1/4 inch from the edge. We're going to leave 3 to 4 inches open on one of the sides so that we can turn this right side out once we get it sewn together. So super easy. One thing I often like to do is I'll use an opposite color so that I know to stop because I'm going to start about here. And then if I just get on a roll and all of a sudden I'll see red, I'll be like, oh, time to stop so that we have room to turn this right side out. So I'm just going to sew around 1/4 inch from the edge. I am using a 1/4 inch foot so I can just line that edge up right with the edge of my foot. Now my foot also has these little lines on it, tells me where the 1/4 inch is. So I line that up as close as possible to the edge, maybe one more stitch, leave my needle down, lift my presser foot and pivot. And sometimes it's a little too far or not quite far enough, but you do it as close as possible and then keep going. And these baskets are so handy. Some people call them a tray. I usually call it a basket because I use them a lot for rolls and bread on the table. They don't have high sides, but they're great for little dinner rolls, for Thanksgiving, for picnics, things like that. So many ways to use them. This could be a quick and easy gift for the holidays to thank someone. Let me know in the comments how you plan on using these. Are you going to use them for yourself? Are you going to sew and sell? Or are you going to give them as gifts? I'd love to know. And now that we're getting to the red one, I know that I am close to where I began and I need to leave some space to turn it. So I'm just going to go pretty much to there and then back and forth again. Before we turn this right side out, we want to trim each of the corners to get rid of any bulk so that we can get as nice of a point as possible when we turn this right side out. Traditionally, when people trim corners, they usually just go straight across with one cut, making sure you do not hit your stitch line. So you get that angle like that. But you'll see when you turn this right side out, you have all of this fabric that is going to be on the inside and it can get a little bit bulky. So I'll show you with a fresh corner, my preferred way. I like to do 2 cuts that goes down a little bit further to get rid of more of this fabric here. But again, making sure you don't get that corner. So I'm going to do one like this. And then I'm going to do the other like that. So you'll see it's a bit more fabric that has come off of this corner. So here's a comparison. This is the straight across and this is this corner. So this is going to fold and give us a much better point. So I'm just going to fix this one to my preferred way, but I wanted to show you the difference. And I'm going to do that to all 4 corners. Now I'm going to turn this right side out. This is so big, it's nice and easy. You can get your whole hand in there and just run your fingers along the sides, along all the edges, and use your finger to get that point out as much as you can to start. And then I will show you how to very gently use a turning tool to make even better corners. You'll see that's pretty rounded if you're just using your finger. But if I use this Riley Blake turning tool, and there's lots of different kinds, you can even use a chopstick. So I'm going to put it in here and I'm going to very slowly and gently push along both sides. So I'm pushing this way and this way to get that corner out as much as I can. If you do it hard, especially because we trimmed, there is definitely a chance that you could see this blue tip come through the fabric, which is absolutely not what we want. We do not want to break the fabric or the stitching on any of these corners. So just patience wins the game on this. Nice and slow, and do this for all 4 corners. And you'll see it bows a little bit because one side has the fusible fleece, so it's a little bit thicker than the other side. And we're going to fix that at the ironing board. Going to make sure these edges are even and these corners are even, and you're going to press that flat. Also, make sure you fold the open turned edge under so that you get a nice straight line across here. So because I know you know how to iron, I'm just gonna go whip that up and I will be right back. Now I'm back from the ironing board and you can see I got that nice and flat, and I made sure that that seam line is right on the edge so you're not seeing any of the back fabric on the front or the front fabric on the back. And where I had left it open to turn, I have that pressed under so it is ready to go. Because all of the sewing from now on is going to show on both the front and the back, I am going to do my little pull up the bobbin trick. But hold on to the top thread, put your presser foot down, put your needle down, keep holding that thread, lift your needle, give that thread a little yank, and then I grab tweezers and I just pull that bobbin thread. So now I am holding both threads. I'm going to pull them back. If your machine will do an automatic knot, you can do that. If not, just hold that. So about 2 or 3 stitches forward and then 2 or 3 stitches back, and that will lock your threads and you will never get one of those nasty bird's nests that happens if you don't hold that bobbin thread up. And now we're just going to sew all the way around about 1/8 of an inch from the edge so that we are closing this opening that we had for turning and just giving a nice finish to the edge. I always cut the beginning threads off before I get back to that spot so that they don't get tangled held in the end threads when I go to finish this sewing. Let's talk a little bit about thread choice really quickly. So for this one, because I used a navy background on this main print and navy on the back, I used both a navy top thread and bobbin thread. But on these, I used different. So I used navy on the side that would be navy and a lighter blue here, just so that the stitching would all be really subtle. And on this one, I used this green for this side, so you don't really see it, and brown for this side. If I had used matching bobbin and top thread, you would either really see that seafoam green on this side or really see the brown stitching on this side. That is a choice you can make if you want the stitching to be part of your creativity. I just like it to blend. So now we have this all edge stitched, and the next thing we need to do is go back to our chart, and we're doing large, the 15-inch square, and the sides are each 2.5 inches high. So we are going to need to sew 2.5 inches from each edge all the way across. So it will intersect and create a little square in each corner. So there's two ways to do that. We can either draw lines on our fabric and sew along them, or we can set up guidelines and you can use the seam guides on your sewing machine to make sure you are 2.5 inches. I'm going to show you how to do both. So you basically need a ruler that is longer than the 15 inches. So I grabbed my 24-inch ruler, and then you can either just take a piece of tailor's chalk and draw that line, or you can use this little Choco marker, which is another way to get chalk. So I'm just going to place this 2.5 inches from the edge, and I'm going to draw a light line. If this was a lighter fabric, I might use a heat erasable pen. So I'm going to draw that on two sides. And then when we get to the sewing machine, I'm going to show you how we can do this by just setting up seam guides and not having to draw on the fabric. And again, kind of like we taped the ruler to fussy cut this. If you're doing a bunch of them to sew and sell or for holiday gifts or for yourself, I would recommend using the guidelines on your sewing machine so you don't have to draw 4 lines on every single one of these that you make. But I like to show you options and different ways to do things. So back to the sewing machine. Now, because we're doing the large one and you need to have your stitch line 2.5 inches in from the needle, that's a little bit longer than what is marked on here. So my guides go to about 2.25 inches. So we're going to need to do a little bit of work on our own. So I am going to take this ruler, I'm going to use a hand wheel, and I'm just going to put the needle almost all the way down. I'm going to make sure it is lined up with the 2.5 inch mark on the ruler. So now you can see this is the guideline that we need to set up. So washi tape to the rescue. You could also use painter's tape here. I'm just going to line that up so that it's right along the edge of the ruler. And then I can make sure it's straight because I can see that it's even with my metal plate. And I'm going to bring it down my sewing machine a bit, just so I have a longer guide to work with. This is going to be super easy to use if I am making a bunch of these. So now we are going to be sewing 4 lines, and I always try and start and do the knot or the forward and back from the edge stitching, not over the edge. And now I'm just going to use this guideline and go all the way to the other side. Now on this side, we have the chalk line, so I don't even have to worry, but the chalk line should keep me right along that edge as well. And what these stitch lines are doing is creating where the tray is going to fold. Now you can leave it just like this with just these pieces that are going to fold up to create the sides. But especially on the bigger ones, I feel like doing a little bit of quilting, even if you're just going this corner to this corner and doing an X, gives this more stability because you can take these and throw them in the laundry, use them over and over. So you want to make sure that things aren't going to get wrinkled and they're not going to separate from that fusible fleece. So a little bit of quilting is a good idea. This one, I could also, kind of do some machine quilting and go around the fish and everything, but we're just keeping it simple. So I am just going to go from corner to corner. Before you put your snaps in, you have to decide which is the outside because these buttons go on the outside. The male and female parts go on the inside. Now we know that we want this to be the inside of our tray because we fussy cut this very specifically to be the inside. But for a moment, let's pretend we don't know. We don't know if we want this to be the inside or if we want this to be the inside. So the way to figure that out is to just fold and clip this together so you can see it in both directions. See that? And that's going to be the outside. That's pretty cute. but maybe you want it to be this way and you would just do the same thing in this direction. For this one, we very specifically knew which was going to be the inside versus the outside. So that's what it would look like if that was the outside. This is too big of a print to be on the outside. But I can show you how it could make a difference. This one could have gone either way. I made it so the fish were on the inside and this print was on the outside. But I could have just as easily have done it this way, right? Where this is on the inside and the fish are on the. So if you got the templates, this makes it easy. I'll show you how to do it without them as well. I cut these out and I laminated them. There's one for each size of the tray. We are doing a large, and you will notice it shows you the corner. So you basically just line that up with the corner like that. And then you know exactly where to poke your holes. We're going to be using the awl, what I like to call a ice pick for fabric. And we're going to push straight through there to make the hole in the perfect spot on our corner. You're going to do that both sides. Be really careful. Do not poke your finger because this is very sharp. So that is super, super easy. Now, if you don't have the templates because you do not want me to have your email address or because you did not buy the pattern, I'm going to show you how to do it without. So you would place the snap heads down in these two corners, and you want to make sure they're not too close to the edge because you don't want them going through the seam allowance, and you want to make sure they're not going over that stitch line because this needs to fold. And so you can just kind of press that down, take a pen and mark that, and then you can take a ruler and figure out where you place that. So I basically did 1/2 inch and 5/8 of an inch from that stitch line. So if I put this on the stitch line, 5/8 of an inch, and I mark 1/2 inch, that is where I'm going to put my holes on that side. So you can do the ruler method, or you can get this template for free by signing up for my email list, or you can purchase the full tutorial with pictures that show you all the steps to do this in my Etsy shop. And both of those links will be below this video. Now I'm going to show you how you put these snaps on using the tool. So you take this backing, or button I call it, and you push it through the hole that you made, and then you push the fabric down so that that point is really sticking out. You need to make sure that point is out as much as it can, because when you put the male or female part on there and then use this tool to squeeze, what it does, it basically mushes that point so that it holds the two pieces together. So you can see here, you can still see the point. And then this is slightly curved and it rests in the black part. And then this pushes down on the other side. So you're gonna hold it like that, hold these two pieces together. You're going to get the button part sitting inside that black. This should be totally over the male or the female piece. You shouldn't be able to see it. And then you're just going to squeeze. And now you can see that that point is now flattened inside there. So you're just going to do the same thing 8 times, but make sure you have one male and one female in each corner. And it is done. So this is how it stores. So easy, does not take up a lot of space, just a piece of fabric. And then when you want to use it, you simply snap these corners together. And then if you don't like it bowed out like that, just kind of fold those in on that stitch line and finger press that, and it's going to give it a better shape. But look how cute that is. So this is the large. And the large is a 9.5 inch square bottom with 2.5 inch sides. This is the medium with a 7.5 inch square bottom and 2 inch sides. And then this is the small with a 5.5 inch bottom and a 1 inch side. All right, so what do you think? Are they gonna like some of these? Are you going to do a gift package with maybe a few? What other combos would you put together? Which are you gonna do first, and who are you going to make them for? Be sure to subscribe to my channel for more easy sewing projects, sew and sell ideas, and beginner quilting tutorials. My name is Tara Reed. I am an artist and a fabric designer with Riley Blake Designs, and I love doing these videos and giving you inspiration and also getting feedback as to how you are using them. So have a great day and happy sewing.